Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Sorry, Dr. Foley. Dr. Foley, roll call when you're ready. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. President Schultz, member of the board, please let the record show that all members are present.
Perfect. I'd like to take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Questions, comments, concerns?
Seconded.
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, 5-1. Dr. Foley, the superintendent's report.
President Schultz, members of the board, we start tonight with one of our very favorite parts, which is our points of pride. So tonight we're going to start with our Cortina Tigers. And I have the joy of inviting Principal Mrs. Papke and Assistant Principal Mrs. DeBono to come up here so that we can celebrate our Cortina Points of Pride.
Thank you. Madam President, Governing Board, Cabinet, thank you so much for allowing us to be here tonight to recognize some very special people. This is one of my favorite things to do, and I wish that we had the opportunity to do more frequently. But we're going to go ahead and start off with our certified staff member. And so I'd like to call Mrs. Leslie Cook up to the front. So Leslie is the kindergarten teacher that every child needs. She understands the importance of reaching the whole child and finding ways to make genuine connections with students in order to bring out the best in them. Leslie brings a great deal of knowledge and expertise to Cortina. She is a critical member of our MTSS team and is someone that other team members depend on when looking at data and making goals for students. Leslie comes to school each day with a smile, and she faces challenges with a positive attitude. She is in the process currently of obtaining her administrative credentials, and she's had lots of opportunities to continue growing her leadership through many projects. And she even helped us to create a school-wide informational pamphlet that's been very helpful and beneficial with information for our newly enrolled families. Leslie has forged trusting partnerships with parents, and she implements a lot of different impactful strategies to support the various needs of the students within her classroom. Administrators and colleagues alike appreciate her willingness to share her knowledge, materials, and skills with others. She is dependable and sometimes even uses her own time during prep to assist others. Leslie's involvement truly helps make Cortina a better place to learn and work, and we are so grateful to have someone like her on our staff. So thank you, Leslie. Leslie, who do you have with you this evening?
I have my husband, Brett, and my son, Cole, who's at Sussman in 7th grade, and my daughter, Kate, who's at Power Ranch in 1st grade.
We're going to have you stay up here. Members of the board, cabinet, and to all of you, thank you for allowing me a few moments of your time today. I am Chrissy DeBono, the assistant principal, and I'm super excited to congratulate and recognize our volunteer points of pride. Miss Molly Gershikoff, could you please come forward? Molly has served Cortina in many ways for many years, but most importantly, as a member of our PTO board. She does anything and everything from assisting in the classroom as well as the overall school, participating in organizing our festivals, our dances, restoring our candy supply for our spirit wear on Fridays. Make a Difference Day is one of her big projects as well, and it is truly impactful on our campus as each year we beautify more and more areas of Cortina. Molly is super, super caring, so much so that, little tidbit, funny story, if you have ever been experienced with the task of helping to control the crowd when there might be an injured furry friend on campus, Molly is your go-to girl. She helped to ensure that our baby bird, who wanted to be a little tiger one day, was safely well taken care of. She even drove our baby bird all the way to a rescue shelter in Phoenix to make sure the bird was safe and cared for, and that our students understood too that all are welcome on Cortina's campus, but also that we have caring hearts and look out for even the littlest among us. We are so fortunate that she gives of her time and is a resource with a sincere desire to help make Cortina a better place to be. So Molly, thank you to partnering with us and being the parent and volunteer that you are. You are amazing. Oh, Molly, please introduce your guest and who you brought.
My husband is in the back, and my two that go to Sossaman, Elijah and Chloe, and my last one at Cortina, Claire.
Thank you. All right. And next up, we would like to recognize our student. So Andrew Morgan, can you please come up to the front? Go. All right, a little bit about Andrew. Andrew is a sixth grade student at Cortina, and he has been a Cortina Tiger since kindergarten. His teachers and I have watched him grow from a curious kindergartner into a delightful young man. Andrew takes his academics seriously, and he is truly an example of a tiger who roars. Andrew is involved in so many different ways, from being a member of NEHS, a Tiger ambassador, playing in the band, and he is a member of the Robotics Club. One of his former teachers, Mrs. Melanie Bodner, shared a little bit about him and said that he has always been a very respectful and responsible student, which I would definitely agree. He's a great leader when working in a group or with his team. He is our go-to person when it comes to helping others in our club. At one of our last tournaments, she said during the finals, he was the only one all day that she saw who offered his hand to the other team for a handshake. And she was so proud. And I think that that is just one example that speaks to what a wonderful young man Andrew is. Andrew sets an example for others and represents Cortina with tremendous pride. And we couldn't be more proud of Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for setting the standard high and showing what it means to be a tiger who roars. And Andrew, can you share with us who you brought tonight?
Today I have my grandparents here, and I also have my mom that's always here for me.
Mrs. Papke and I are so fortunate to have an amazing classified staff at Cortina, and tonight we're excited to recognize and celebrate one of our very amazing paraprofessionals. So would Miss Francesca come on up? Francesca, you're welcome. As I shared, Francesca is super dedicated to Cortina. She's a paraprofessional in our special education team in one of our cross-cat classrooms, and she is absolutely adored by all of our students and staff alike. When you walk into a room, you feel light and energy just radiating off of Francesca. Her smile is so contagious and a delight to see. Anyone who encounters her cannot leave visiting with her without feeling better about themselves. She connects with everyone, has such a helpful heart. She can genuinely be seen all day, every day, working with kids, for kids, and the betterment of our school as a whole. Our students respect her greatly. She genuinely displays, and they genuinely know how much she cares for them on a daily basis. Her positive encouragement, her delightful demeanor is so uplifting, and I honestly cannot thank you enough. Cortina would not be who we are without you. Thank you. And Francesca, who did you bring as your guest tonight?
My husband is here, my son, Ricky, my mom, and my brother.
We're going to pause for a brief picture.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, that was fun to celebrate our Cortina Tigers, and now we're going to celebrate our Power Ranch Panthers. So I would like to invite Mr. Reuter and Mrs. Coda up to celebrate Power Ranch Points of Pride. I'll help hold. What can I do?
We're going to get some more flowers. Good evening. President Schultz, members of the board, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present tonight. My name is Chris Reuter, and we're going to start by nominating by recognizing the student we nominated, and I'm going to have both Ethan and his teacher, Miss Carlucci, come on up here. We have Ethan Zavala. That's yours, buddy.
Thank you. This is Ethan Zavala, deserves every bit of that. Ethan is a model student. He has been at Power Ranch for many, many years. He is responsible, respectful, and hardworking, to say the least. He is probably one of the best mathematicians I have ever met in my entire life. He loves math. Future, right here. His ability to persevere through challenging life experiences has resulted in a young man who is self-reflective and one of the most compassionate students I've ever seen. His ability to show empathy for people around him is incredible. It is just innate. It is who he is. Ethan loves to learn and is motivated to be the best student he can be every single day. He comes into the classroom, he is ready to learn, he helps others, even though he is exceptionally intelligent, and he knows that he is. He is humble in his demeanor. He never brags about it, and his intentions to support Power Ranch, his teachers, his school, his friends, is unprecedented. He is in so many clubs. I think I might have left one out. Student council, choir, chess, robotics. Did I leave anything out? Junior ensemble. He does it all, he does it all. So I am honored to recognize you today, Ethan. Congratulations.
And can you share with who you brought this evening?
So I brought my dad, mom, and my two sisters, Ella, Sophia.
And next up, we are going to recognize Lindsay Keaton, our classified employee.
Lindsay Keaton, there are so many things to say about this lovely lady. We are so lucky to have her on our campus. Lindsay is an exceptional paraprofessional. She's so full of joy and comes to work every day with the biggest smile on her face. So what you see up here, this is what we get every day, all day long. She brings so much positivity and light to our school. She builds relationships and makes connections with all students, not just the ones she's assigned to work with. She understands their needs, brings great ideas to support students, and works closely with teachers to help students succeed. We are so very lucky to have her on our campus. Who did you bring with you today?
Oh, I brought two members of my family here. I have Emery Keaton, my daughter at Power Ranch, 6th grade, and my son, Julian Keaton, who I shouldn't say, but is at Castile High School. Sorry about that.
Also, for any of you who drive down Ranch House Parkway in the morning before the way students are going to school, she's the one enforcing that speed limit on Ranch House, so make sure you don't cross her because she has close ties with Gilbert PD. So, next up, we'd love to have Jackie Johnson, our volunteer, come on up here to be recognized. So Jackie Johnson is one of our parent volunteers. She is on campus as much as she can be, and she was actually nominated by quite a few of our staff members for the efforts she goes above and beyond to support our teachers. So she has two students here with her that she'll introduce in a little bit, but since one of them is in kindergarten this year, she's on campus even more than she was in the past. She supports our PTO. She's in charge of all our restaurant nights and the evening events with our fundraising committee. She works very closely with classroom teachers to support in the classroom, to make copies. But one of the things that stuck out to me is that she really goes out of her way to connect with teachers even above 2nd grade, where she doesn't have students, to support them in their classrooms, whether it's making copies, getting things for them in the lounge, in the workroom, putting together things for them for upcoming events or activities. And our staff really just appreciates everything you do. And she also knows that there's a great possibility that there's a hole in our PTO next year that we might nudge her to help fill, because she is very capable of doing that. So thank you for all that you do for us. And I know that she is very proud of her family and also appreciates their support, because she asked if there was a limit on how many she could bring. So I know she wants to introduce them.
Hey. I brought both of my Panthers. My little Panther is Brigadier in 2nd grade and Bridget in kindergarten. And I have my sister-in-law, my husband, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. And if there were more seats, I'm pretty sure more would have came. I have a very supportive family, and you guys are included in that. You guys have made everything very welcoming, so thank you.
And last but not least, Ashley Grimm. Come on up. So Ashley is our music teacher on our campus, and the things that are written about Ashley pretty much have everything to do with everything else she does outside of what she just does in the music room, because she pours her heart and soul into her music lessons and giving the students on our campus those opportunities during music. So I'm going to read it because the person who wrote this really knows you and what you mean to our campus. Mrs. Grimm goes above and beyond in her duties as a teacher, staff member, mentor, and role model. Ashley goes out of her way to help anyone in need and pours her whole self into providing memorable experiences for her students. Between being an excellent music teacher, putting together concerts, running drama club and choir, and helping others out with after-school clubs, she shares her positivity throughout the entire school and makes it a better and brighter place to work. And I think one example I can share is when she came to me a few years ago and asked if she could do archery as one of our electives. And I remember reaching out to Mrs. Richards and asking her, and we worked out some things, but she never really just takes the easy road. She's willing to do whatever it takes to give our students those amazing experiences. And I know that your colleagues that are here to support you know that. We can see it in the winter concert and all the time and energy you pour into that, but also in drama and choir, giving our students those opportunities, adding ensemble to it this year to add to the program. We love you and we greatly appreciate everything you do for us.
I'm sure my parents would have come if I had actually asked them to be here, but I brought my husband, Dylan. He's third row back.
Picture time.
Thank you to our Points of Pride tonight. We always like to share that you are more than welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but we also know some of you have school tomorrow, and if you choose to leave at this time, our feelings are not hurt, but we always want to give you that opportunity. Thank you for those who are leaving for coming tonight to celebrate our Points of Pride. President Schultz, members of the board, I'll continue with our superintendent's report. Always we conclude with upcoming events. As you know, by no means is this an exhaustive list, just a few highlights of things that we have coming up. We want to highlight out that we have another parent evening is connected with our strategic plan that will be hosted later this evening, or later this week. A parent evening, these have been well received. We also, next Tuesday, will have a full house for our business partner breakfast, and we're very excited about this because we're going to be showcasing some of our incredibly bright, talented, and beautiful students who highlight parts and pieces of the strategic plan that is alive and well and being implemented, as well as kindergarten roundup and other events. So as you can see, just a few things to keep us busy for the next few weeks. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Foley. Request to speak. We value the input from our constituents. This time has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Please remember this is not an appropriate venue to evaluate, discuss, or criticize district personnel. Policy KEB provides a process for complaints about personnel. Speakers should be aware of the false statements about individuals may result in civil liability. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to direct staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. First, we have Hayden Nguyen.
Hi, my name is Hayden. I'm 17. I go to high school, not here in the Higley family, but in neighboring Gilbert. And even though I don't go to a Higley school, I just want to say that I speak for, I think, everyone when I say that mental health matters. And right now, we as students are going through a mental health crisis. We know this. We know that suicide rates are up, and we know that people are really suffering right now in our schools. But within this crisis, we also must recognize that at the forefront, at the heart of this crisis, are our LGBTQ students. We must acknowledge, and you must acknowledge at the board, as the board, that LGBTQ students are suffering the most. That according to the Trevor Project, nearly half of all LGBTQ youth considered suicide last year. That nearly 1 in 5 trans and non-binary kids considered suicide last year. And you must acknowledge this as a problem, and you must take this into account when we talk about GSAs. I was told that there might be people coming here tonight, and there probably are people here tonight, to tell you about why you should take down GSAs, change your name, get them out of Higley schools. But GSAs are a safe space for LGBTQ kids and students to express who they are, not a place of indoctrination. You must acknowledge that because we know that LGBTQ affirming schools are safe spaces for children, and that LGBT affirming schools report lower rates of suicide and lower rates of self-harm than other schools. We know that transgender kids who are allowed to use their preferred pronouns and their preferred names report better mental health than when they are not. We must provide a safe space for our students. And we know that investment into counseling with this issue, and not SROs, are the only way that we can fix and save lives of students in our districts. So you as the school board have a special responsibility to fix this, in my opinion, and I think on behalf of all students, when they actually go to public schools, know that these places are safe spaces and not spaces of indoctrination. You have a responsibility to our parents and to our kids, to students in your district, to save GSAs, to support them, and to provide support for our students in their mental health as they're going through these struggles right now. This is a real problem. And as people come up here today to speak, I just want you to know that on behalf of students, on behalf of teachers, people actually in public schools, that GSAs are for students. They're helpful for people's mental health, and they keep people alive. And these are lives we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ginger Smith. Oops, I think.
Hello, my name is Ginger Smith, and this is a community where I thought I could raise my children in a safe, wholesome community. We're not supposed to conform to this world. We're supposed to, sorry, I wanted to quote scripture specifically. Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve that what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. We're not supposed to sexualize children. It has no position in the schools. After school, during school, I don't care. And I don't care if my kids are involved, their peers are, and we're all raising our children in the same community. And they're gonna have to eventually grow up and work together in this world. And if we start sexualizing them so young, it's taking away their innocence, and it's just by design. This is not what schools are meant for. There are kids that are graduating, they don't know how to read, write, do basic math. Oh gosh, the math. It's just really heartbreaking as a mother to see what's going on in our whole world. And why is it we spend more per pupil in this country than any other country, yet we do have these kids that are graduating and they're completely illiterate and they can't do math. We need to get back to what schools were designed for, and that is to educate our children. We need to get back to teaching American history and why we are where we are. I don't hate anyone. I love everyone, and I want people to feel accepted, but we cannot accept sexualizing our children. It is completely inappropriate to bring up any sort of gender identity, all of these ideologies into the schools. It's just inappropriate, and I don't want to abuse children. I don't want to see other children being abused, and that is all I have to say.
Thank you. Next up, we have Heather Balk.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys tonight?
Good, how are
I'm
you?
Heather. I am the very proud parent of a junior at Higley High School. He's not an athlete. He is shy, but you know what? He found his people in the robotics club. And do you know what they're doing? Going to state. And that is so exciting. And what I love about Higley Unified School District and Higley High School is the diversity that we have in our community, that we have something for everyone, that they feel supported, that they have the mental health, that they can connect with other people who are like them. And that is so important to build and nurture our students from the youngest all the way through high school. And I just love that Higley has so many different opportunities for our students. Little story, just to tell you about the success of Robotics Club for my little guy. The robot comes home every Thursday night, and it lives at our house, and it has ruined our dining room table, and that's okay. We'll get another one when everyone moves out. But the robot has changed and varied, and my son came home one day from school and he was so disappointed. He's like, I don't even know why I go to robotics. It's so much work and it's not working. Last weekend, you guys, his robot, I don't know the stuff, but it scoops up the disc, it shoots the disc, it launches the rope, and they are just thrilled. And to see my son grow and thrive with people that are like him, regardless if they are into robotics, if they are in GSA, if they are Black athletes, it doesn't matter. You find your people, you love your people, and you be with your people. And thank you, Higley, for supporting that.
Thank you. And then we have Mr. Neil Carter.
President Schultz, distinguished board members and guests. My name is Neil Carter. I serve as one of the 2 state legislators for District 15, which is all of Queen Creek, most of Santan Valley, and a little bit of Southeast Mesa. I'm on my way home from the Capitol right now, but I wanted to stop by and read my contact information into the record so I can be even more easily reachable. My number is 480-628-1037. And you can reach me at ncarter@azledge.gov. I'm just here to be of service, so please let me know how I can be of service. Funny story, when I was in the 6th grade, we had to do a career report, and we had to interview someone, and I interviewed the superintendent of our local district, who I think was bemused that that's what I wanted to do. But anyway, thank you, members. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Roy Morales.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Foley, Tyler, staff. It's been brought to my attention recently that we had discovered that there is a GSA club here at Higley High School, and then there's another club at Williamsfield called the Queer Club. I forget the name of that. And I was surprised as a community member to find out that such a club existed. And when I went onto the website, on the Higley School website, it just says GSA. To the unsuspecting parent, we wouldn't know what GSA meant. And it just seems kind of innocuous that it's there. We wouldn't question it. I'm wondering why the transparency isn't, why isn't the full acronym listed on that website? And I've also noticed of all the clubs at Higley High School, there's no way for a parent to be able to click on each and every club to find out its purpose, its mission, and why it's there, and how is that going to enhance the student experience. So I'm concerned about that. Now, in addition to that, there was a recent article that was written at the Williamsville High School newspaper, which appears to be written and edited by students on why sex ed needs to be part of the Arizona curriculum. And not only just the basic part of sexual ed, but about gender and identity and sexuality. Now, mind you, we all know that the human brain isn't fully developed until our mid-20s and beyond. And yet we have students in this club and in the public forum and a school newspaper talking about gender identity and sexuality when they themselves have not been fully formed in the home or in their religious communities. The concern that I also have is that because of the lack of transparency, it may be violating some of the Arizona's revised statutes, more specifically 1-602, Section 8, which which parents have the exclusive right to make sure that their children's education isn't obstructed by the state or by the school system. The parents' rights is also to make sure that their upbringing of a minor child is under their direction and not at the schools, and that the right to direct moral religious training of a minor child. With these clubs in place, we don't know whether or not our students or our children are going to these clubs, and if they are they actually coming home and telling their parents, are they participating in these clubs? And if they aren't, then we're enabling them to lie to their parents by excluding that information. The parents have the sole right, while the minor is in their care, to teach about sexuality and gender identity based on their cultural, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. It should not be left to the state to do such a thing. Now, as I understand, this district does not have a sexual education, but yet somehow there's a club after school that is talking about such subjects. And it's outside the purview of the parents. Again, the parents are the ultimate deciders about what education their children receive. So please, I ask you to reconsider this and discuss among yourself that this is not an appropriate venue for talking about sexual topics with students. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'd like to make a motion that we approve consent agenda 5.1 to 5.10, sorry. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
I'd like to make a motion to pull 5.6 from the consent agenda for further discussion.
To pull 5.6 from the agenda for further discussion. Is there a second? Okay, so 5.6 stays on the consent agenda. Christina, do I have to do all in favor? Or no, I just say because we don't have a second. Okay, thank you. And then questions, comments, and concerns. Did you want to talk about 5.6 or?
I do. So I want to ask some questions not only because I'm curious, but I think parents should understand some of these things. When reviewing the information, I wanted to understand what the sleeping arrangements are on this camp. It was different when I attended, but things have changed, the world has changed. So I want to know, are the boys separate from the girls? In the paperwork, it says by gender. Is that by biological gender? I also noticed that in there it talks about whole student, holistic, social emotional curriculum, and I don't understand how that's associated with science camp. kids and parents think that they're sending their kids to science camp, but there's all this information in there about safe space, safe from who, fostering empathy, vulnerability, inclusion. I mean, it makes it sound so nice. Trust, environmental stewardship, is that related to climate change? Experiential play, what does that even mean? When you look at the camp, it says that its curriculum is NGSS. So you just have to keep digging, and you go to all these different websites that is directed from the camp website, gocampway.com. And when you look up NGSS, Aligned Science Camp, you can see that Arizona is not an NGSS state, and it's not within the Arizona state standards. So our kids are attending something where Arizona state standards they're being taught something that's not within the Arizona state standards. So again, like I want to understand, like, are kids going to science camp, or are kids going to a counseling camp? Do parents have a way to opt in or opt out? Are parents notified what the curriculum is going to be? Because I, as a parent, would want to know what type of curriculum, because if I'm sending them to camp, science camp, I'm assuming it's going to be science related. So I think it's important that parents are aware, but at the same time, it's going to make it very difficult for parents to be able to send their kids to science camp and be able to opt out of the social emotional aspect of it. So I wanted to make that known so that parents are aware and that these conversations are had with parents.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Reese, did you have something you wanted to say? And then Lindsay.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I think you're reading a little too much into it. Just saying I chaperoned for 2 of my kids for science camp. My husband chaperoned for my son at science camp. The location is simply a camp space. It's our teachers, it's our curriculum. We're not sending them off somewhere to be taught an unknown curriculum. The teachers work, they do in-class stuff prior to science camp. They prepare them for what they're gonna do while they're there. They use the outdoor space to do the natural sciences. They dissected owl pellets, which the kids absolutely loved. But it's a rotational group that they do different types of science at. And it is all done and taught by our Higley teachers. No one from this GNSS is teaching them anything. They're not doing anything. It's our curriculum. It's our teachers. We use their space. So they have cabins. Most of them have cabins. Some may have tents, just like Girl Scout camp, things like that. As a parent who chaperoned science camp, for some of these 6th graders, the social emotional piece is some of them may have never been away from home. Some of them may have never even spent the night at grandparents' house. That this is their first experience away from home, away from their parents. And kids struggle. I mean, they struggle being in a different place, away from their parents. They usually allow, it depends on how many parents volunteer for chaperones, because they can only have so many, that they will do, if they have more than they need, they'll do a lottery, and it's females versus males. There were 2 adults per cabin with the kids. If you have, when my husband went with my son, there was another dad there who had a daughter. Well, they weren't gonna put him in to chaperone the girls overnight. He was with whatever group his daughter was with during the day, because they're assigned different groups. They don't stay with their cabin. And then at night, he was in a cabin with the boys, and somebody else was in the cabin with the girls. So we don't mix that, and it's based on biological gender. If, for whatever reason, there's a concern somewhere within those assignments, the teacher, the principal, and the parents can meet to discuss to work out what's appropriate. But we're not doing a GSAA curriculum. We're not, the majority of our schools, I think there's an exception of maybe 1 or 2 elementary schools who don't go away for science camp. I know one of them goes to the zoo and does science camp. It's our curriculum. It's our teachers that are teaching it. It just gives them the opportunity to be able to do natural sciences in that environment and stuff that we couldn't do in a classroom. And like I said, for the social, emotional, safe, I was one of those parents who had to really work and comfort children that they were okay. And it was even a matter of, okay, let's call your mom, let's call your dad, you know, because that, like I said, for some of these kids, maybe not for yours, mine, whoever, but for some of them, that's the first time they're experiencing being away from home. So there is a lot of social emotional support there on, it's okay, we can be away from home, you're okay, you're safe, and letting them, trying to help them work through that so that they know that they are okay. We would never try and send them out somewhere they're not, and that's how they learn and build trust. So, I hear everything you were reading, and that's not our science camp. So, it's a really good opportunity for our kids. It's a great learning experience. It's a great bonding experience, and our teachers, the science teachers, it's typically the whole 6th grade team that goes, so they know all these kids. Sometimes the music teacher also goes, the principal or assistant principal or both. There's a lot of people who go and help support and run different learning opportunities, and parents have the option to volunteer to chaperone so that they can go and do it. And parents also have the opportunity to opt out. If, when we first returned to science camp after COVID, that was a very difficult decision for some parents on the comfortability of sending their children to be in a enclosed place that they don't know, have they been sick, are they sick, this and that. I was fortunate enough to experience science camp with my son when the swine flu came out. And guess who? The whole 6th grade Coronado came back with swine flu. It was very, very fun. But they do have that opportunity to opt out, and we have had parents who opt out, and that's fine. And their children can still go to school even though the whole 6th grade's gone, and they just have an alternate assignment that they do. And so there's nothing wrong with that. People opt out for many different reasons. We never want them to opt out for a financial reason, that we are always able to work something out and use tax credit to help financially support their child to go to science camp. So we don't ever want them to choose to opt out for a financial reason. But any other reason, they can choose to opt out. And the teachers, from what I've experienced from all 3 of my kids, there were always kids in their grades who opted out. And they were very respectful and everything else, and did everything they could within their power not to have that kid felt left out. So I appreciate you doing your research on where they're going and everything, but that is the location of the camp. We use several locations. We went to one in Prescott. I want to say, I don't know, there's so many up there, but we're only using their space. we're not using their curriculum. They're not teaching our kids. It's our children, it's our teachers, it's our curriculum, and it's a continuation from what they're learning in the classroom. Then they transition to natural science.
President.
One point, also having chaperone, the social and emotional part of it is also that these kids come together too and create a group. So there's a purple group and an orange group, and then they have a cheer, and they work together. And some of these kids aren't friends because just the way it goes with the cabins, you get to pick one friend. I mean, I went, my daughter, she had 2 of her friends, but then the rest of them weren't, and they didn't exactly get along. But by the end of science camp, then they did get along, and they were able to learn to work with different people. And we were the purple group, and we had a purple cheer, and we performed it, and it was a lot of fun. And there isn't, I rarely saw the boys and the men, and the only thing, and like Christina said, the camp is just a space. They cook the food for the kids, and that's it. I never saw any of the other people besides when we left and when we ate and arrived.
President Schultz. And I did go when my oldest was in 6th grade. I don't know which location it was, and it was great. I think I was actually there with Coach Ross. And I do remember, like, it was a great experience for these kids, but that was, 6 years ago. And so much has changed. And trust me, like, I'm not against, I know there's the kids who are afraid of being away from home, and for teachers to step in and act as that parent role to comfort them, and that's not what I'm against. And so maybe I am reading too much into it, but this is the information that I had from their website, and then it just kept going. Like, it would create one link, and then it would go into another link, and the current curriculum for the SEL and the whole child and the whole school, is what I have an issue with. But, obviously now understanding that it's just us using their space, it makes such a huge difference. And so that's comforting to hear, because then none of this other stuff comes into play. So please don't think that I'm against, like, teachers comforting children, because that's not the case. It's this curriculum that I found that I have a problem with. Thank you.
And you said you went 6 years ago. I went last year. I actually missed a meeting because of science camp. And so last year it was the same as how Christina described it as well. I went to the Prescott location, but yeah. Mrs. Lindsay, do you have?
President Schultz, can I make a comment? Ms. Reese and Ms. Schultz, thank you for the thorough explanation and sharing of your experiences. My kids went, I didn't go. I was in education and I just needed a break. But I do, as we had speakers today speak out on views of a hot topic and reality in this country, I appreciate Anna, you asking those questions. I appreciate you, things I didn't think about, and it's clear with our community members that there are people that care on both sides. So thank you for asking that, and thank you for the clarification as well.
Anything else? Good. Sorry. Did you have anything else you wanted to share? I feel bad.
Only if you have questions.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, Christina seconded. So all in favor of approving consent agenda items 5.1 to 5.10?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you hear it? Aye.
Yes. Okay, 5 ayes. All right, the consent agenda passes. And then we'll go on to informational items with the Transportation Department update. And today is National Transportation Day. So it is a perfect time for an update, and we appreciate all of our drivers getting students to and from and everything they do.
If I may, President Schultz and members of the board, introduce Mr. Josh Crosby, our Director of Transportation, and Mr. Tim Harrison, our Assistant Director of Transportation. Both have been with the district a number of years, and so, yeah, it is fitting that this presentation is on National School Bus Driver Appreciation Day. So With that, I'll let Mr. Crosby.
Board, thank you for having us tonight. Yes, we are celebrating Love the Bus Month, and today was a big day. We celebrated with burritos and early release and a little rain and wind, and it was a fun day. So thank you again for this time to share a little bit about our department and changes that we've seen in the past year. So we currently employ 51 bus drivers, 18 bus aides, 7 office staff, 5 mechanics, and 4 van drivers. Our fleet consists of 87 yellow buses that run 272 routes a day and over 700,000 miles a year. Our buses obviously service our 15 in-district schools, as well as 15 out-of-district schools that are required for some of our special needs programs and students in transition. We have 5,415 students that are eligible to ride the bus twice per day. We were the first district to offer the Here Comes the Bus app in the state of Arizona, which has shown to be a great benefit to many of our families. We do offer paid training for all of our prospective drivers. And the Higley Bus Yard is actually a certified ADOT site for the state of Arizona for third-party testing. So we do all the road tests and everything in-house in our district. We also provide that service to some of our other neighboring districts around. And we do also participate in other activities besides to and from school and activity trips. The APS Electric Light Parade, the Williamsfield Haunted Bus, and those kind of things. So we try to stay active in our community. So who qualifies for transportation? Board policy states elementary and middle school students who live outside a 1-mile radius from their school or are required to cross railroad tracks or major thoroughfares, we transport those students. So pretty much every elementary school in our district has a boundary of the arterial streets around it. The exception is Higley Traditional with the train tracks going by there. It kind of shortens their boundary a little bit. So we bus across the street for those students. High school students who live more than a 1.5-mile radius from their school are eligible for transportation as well. I do want to point out that with COVID and the driver shortages, there have been many districts around the state that have increased their high school radius from 2 miles, and some are even up to 3 miles down in the south. So fortunate enough, we were able to keep ours at the 1.5. I mentioned students in transition, or the SIT program. Those are students who become homeless, and once they become homeless, their education is protected. Wherever they move, the 2 districts share in transportation of allowing that child to continue to attend the school of they were in when they became displaced. So that makes up for the majority of our 15 other schools across the metro area that we drive to. We also do special needs students in our district, and that is a big part of our program. Those students have to qualify through Shauna Miller and her special education department through an IEP to qualify for transportation, and we'll provide services to them not only to our in-district schools, but any outplaced students that Shauna feels fit for that student. And lastly, we do allow a limited number of boundary exceptions each year. If we have space on a bus and a family submits an application, it's a first-come, first-served process. It can be revoked at any time if the bus is needed for capacity for those that actually live on that particular route. On-time performance, that's one of our biggest goals in transportation, obviously, is to get the kids to school on time. I'm proud to say that we have a 99.27% on-time performance for our district, which is remarkably well. I know there's some districts around that are doing double backs with shortage of drivers and picking up kids 30 or 40 minutes late after the bell rang and those kind of scenarios. But some of the reasons we're late, we got to experience 3 of these in the last 2 days. Early release schedules are always tough for us. We have a shorter window to get the same amount of work done, and we struggle with that sometimes. Emergency vehicles and traffic accidents. We have student delays and behavior issues, heavy traffic in and around the schools, particularly the beginning of the school year or on rainy days. Everyone drives to pick up their kids and we're stuck in the same traffic as everyone else. Yesterday, we had an example of a train delay where a train broke down blocking the Higley Road railroad crossing, which, as you know, is right next to our bus yard, and those kind of things show up without notice. Weather, the past couple mornings we've had some rain. We do have driver errors, we have changes in routes, and we are not exempt from bus breakdowns or an error with our dispatching office. And sometimes we just have drivers that are new to the route and they're still trying to get comfortable, and we try not to rush them. We'd rather them take their time. Something we're really proud of is the elimination of charter buses this year. So far, knock on wood, we have not chartered a bus in this district. We've done everything in-house. Last year, we spent over $195,000 chartering buses. And again, we were able to bring that all back in-house this year and save the district some money. Some of our biggest expenditures budget-wise, second to salaries, is fuel consumption, as you can imagine. Big buses aren't the most fuel economical vehicles around. What we're looking at here on this slide is just the first semester of last school year and the first semester of this year. You'll notice in 21-22, we consumed a little over 68,000 gallons of fuel at a cost of $185,000. This year, we actually only consumed 65,988 gallons in that same period, but the cost was $243,164. We all saw the same thing at the pumps when we fill up our cars as well. So looking at the last line there, we consumed fewer gallons, but yet we paid almost $60,000 more for what we did consume. So that is a big, like I tell Tyler, you know, when he wants my budget, I said, tell me what the fuel price is gonna be. And if we all knew that, we would do quite well. Aligning with strategic anchor number 2, highly effective personnel. All of our buses and passenger vans that are used for student use have this particular tablet in them. It's provided to us through a third-party vendor named Synovia, which was recently bought out by CalAmp. This is kind of the backbone to the Here Comes the Bus routing system, as well as it allows us, our drivers, to do electronic logs and pre-trips, kind of go paperless inside the bus. They recently turned on a new feature that we played around with the end of last year and then rolled it out this year, which scores our drivers on their performance as they conduct their routes. It looks at on-time performance, excessive speed, harsh braking, harsh turns, and idling. And I did want to point out that if a bus is running late, we're not dinging the driver for that. We don't want them to try to speed to catch up or anything like that. So the way we have it set up is if they leave the bus stop early, meaning like the bus stops at 7 o'clock and they leave at 6:57, they may get a deduction for that. Idling is anything over 5 minutes. Obviously, when we have high heat warnings, we loosen that up a little bit so that they can idle to keep the buses cool in the summer. This chart just compares last year to this year. The dark blue is last year and the lighter blue is this year. You can see that last year we had 50 drivers. This year we're at 51. Last year we had 22 aides and we're down to 18 this year. And both years we've had 4 routes that are unassigned. I want to be clear that the routes are still running. There is just no driver available to bid on those routes. So we're running them in-house with office staff and mechanics and other people that have their CDL licenses. And then the last column is absenteeism. With COVID and other things, we were pretty high last year at 6.32 bodies absent every day, and this year we're around 4. So we've seen an improvement there. So we'll take a little bit deeper dive into our driver shortage. It's obviously not unique to Higley. It's nationwide, and you've probably seen it on the news here as well. We have received 26 bus driver applications this school year. Of those 26, 12 of them were hired. 4 of them eventually resigned after finding a better pay position. 4 were disqualified at the interview, and 10 declined when offered the position by HR, with the most common reason given was compensation. So that brought us up 8 drivers essentially from that application pool. If you marry that up with our existing drivers, we had 2 bus drivers that retired. We had 2 others that found other employment, 2 resigned, and we had 1 internal transfer. So our net gain is 1 driver up from where we were last year. The next slide is the exact same format, but using bus aides. However, we've only received 2 applications to be a bus aide this year. Of those 2, 1 of them was hired and 1 was declined when offered the position. Internally with our existing aides, we had 2 that found new employment and 1 transferred internally, and then 2 resigned. And that's how we lowered our number down by 4 for our overall bus aide count. On this chart, we're kind of deducing some things that obviously pays a big thing for our drivers here. We have struggled staying with the pack, as I guess you would say. Higley's in green there. We have a starting driver pay of $18.33, and the other districts around us, kind of our competition, as I like to say, are higher than that, with the exception of Combs School District. Also want to point out that just about a year ago, January of 2022, we gave a mid-year salary increase to our CDL drivers, our bus drivers, of $2 an hour, which we're very appreciative of, but had that not occurred, we would have been at $16.33, essentially down at the bottom. So salary is a big thing. The other piece is that it is a split shift, and they're only paid when they are driving the bus. They're not paid for the in-between time while the students are at school. So unless they pick up field trips and other things, you're essentially at work for a 10-hour day, getting paid 6 to 8 hours a day on average. So with that, that is our transportation update. I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you have.
President Schultz, Mr. Crosby, I wanted to understand why the number of gallons went down and how often we're looking at our routes to maximize the savings on the mileage.
Sure, absolutely. We looked hard at that. We just completed our state report. We feel that our biggest reason for that is we had a student for Shauna Miller in the SPED department that was a one-way trip twice, all the way off the 51 north every day last year. And since that student is no longer being transported to that out-of-district placement school, that cut a big piece off of that. Additionally, some of our sports teams have been more local this year. We haven't traveled as far, so I believe that's a piece of it as well.
Other questions? Mrs. Reese?
President Schultz, thank you. Mr. Crosby, I was wondering if you can tell me how we're getting the word about Here Comes the Bus app out.
Good question. It is included in a letter that is received by every parent that has an eligible child at the beginning of the school year. It is also on the school's web pages and also through transportation. And it's also on the HUSD app. Once you log into the HUSD app, it's one of the apps on the second menu there as well.
Because I've had parents, and I know we've had some ups and downs and some concerns, and been a little bit late to some schools on different days, like you said, primarily early release days. And parents expressing some frustration. They're like, you know, the bus is 20 minutes late, or I don't know where my kid is. And it's like, well, did you check the Here Comes the Bus app? And it's, what's that? And I mean, I had it long ago when it first came out. So I just don't know if there's something we can do to continuously promote that and try and get our families more used to being able to look on the app. It doesn't change us arriving late, but it does help the parents know where their children are.
Right.
You know, especially with those from Cooley to Coronado. I mean, it's a long route. It runs later as it is for the kids to get home. And so if we're running a little bit late, whether it be traffic, whether it be, you know, trying to just deal with the routes and everything, it's a peace of mind for those parents. But I'm not kidding, every parent I've heard complain about buses, and I've said, well, did you look and were you notified? Could you see that they were late? And they weren't even aware of what the app was. And information is a huge part of the frustration at that point. You know, at least they know.
Right.
So.
And I think we have just under 3,000 parents that are using the app right now, last time I checked. But that could also be one student with a mom and a dad. That would be two accounts, so it's always hard to say. But we can try to push it up on our website a little bit. And I will say, when parents do call us asking where a bus is, we're certainly helpful and we'll look it up for them. But while we're on the computer looking it up, we try to tell them, you know, this is something you can access yourself with the Here Comes the Bus app.
Yeah.
And it is a great tool for us too, because we can message parents on a specific bus if there is an issue. So.
And I think too, the other thing is for, you know, after breaks, or I'm sure you have riders fluctuate at the semester. There's, especially in high school, you get those who now can drive and no longer riding the bus.
Yeah,
and then you have those other ones that, hey, they weren't riding the bus before. Maybe they got the car taken away. But
that's a good point, because even with sports, we see it change from semester to or quarter to
if they have
quarter,
practice or things like
exactly.
that, for sure. So I hope that if we can just find a way at specific intentional times too to share that, to try and get more people on there.
I'll brainstorm with our public relations and see what we can do.
And of course, it's not high school parents that have the concern. It's the elementary, middle school. And I just wanted to touch too on the different cost. Just like every other family, we don't have the option to raise our prices. Here we are spending so far an additional $60,000 almost in fuel. We have no control of those prices, and we have to do it. But we don't have the product to raise a price to try and help offset that cost. And so that continuously, it's got to come from somewhere.
Right.
Same, you have it with fuel, we have it with food. Same thing all of our families are dealing with as well. But while we're not a store that can raise their price to offset that, it's got to come from somewhere. So we're still paid the same per student with these rising costs. So thank you for putting that in there. I know we all feel it, but I don't think we always see it from the school district side, and it's volume. It's a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Reese. Anyone?
So sorry, I actually have two, but they're quick. The first one that I have is, we're down for bus aids. Do we currently have buses running that are in need of an aid that don't have them? Like, are you guys internally picking that up as well, like the 4 routes?
Correct. If the IEP states they need an aide on the bus, which most of them do, and a second adult is on that bus. Their job title may not be bus aide, it might be routing coordinator or myself or our secretary, but the buses still have the second adult on there.
Sure, awesome. Well, and by that, sorry, that's a lot. The second question I have, and I'm gonna fumble what it was, your word choice exactly, as far as the ADOT with our stuff, do we get revenue for that? Do we save something for that? Like, I'm curious what that is.
We do. So essentially, we have a painted course on our blacktop that is certified by ADOT, and we have a third-party examiner on our site, and then we're subject to audits, basically. And that's what we have to do to keep compliance. For our benefit, for our district, is our trainees can train right on our lot. We don't have to go somewhere else, so that saves time and money. And we're also able to test our people, which means we don't have to make appointments at MVD and wait in line and all that. Since we have the course and everything set up, we do charge other districts to use our course. So we do collect revenue from that. And I mean, it's not a lot, but it is something for them to at least come and use our course and site.
Sure.
So.
For sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Not take a moment to share something. I always had an appreciation, and I knew that there was a lot involved in transportation. I had no idea until last year when we were in the middle of our highest cases of COVID, and we had a lot of people out. One of the things many school districts had to do was actually cancel bus transportation because they simply could not get drivers. I will tell you that Josh and his team, Josh and Tim, he was often the very first person who was on my phone, probably about 5:30 in the morning, and he was usually the very last person on my phone. And I personally witnessed him and every person on his team literally doing every job in that department to make it happen. And I will tell you, they were joking about, needing people to drive buses, and I'm really glad that neither one of us ever ended up driving buses, because we probably wouldn't have done very well on anything. But I will tell you, truly appreciate the amount of work that this team did to make sure transportation happened and continues to happen. And we were worried about plans and backup plans should any one of these gentlemen end up being sick at the exact same time, but could not have done it without their true servant leadership. And truly, I learned myself a whole lot more about transportation, more than I ever wanted to know, and I'm deeply grateful about the work that happens in that department. So to you and your team, thank you for what you do every day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Foley. I had reached out to Mr. Crosby when I had concerns, and he was extremely helpful and extremely responsive and explained to me different things about the bus and what was going on. And one of the reasons I brought this up is because I had heard about buses being late, and I experienced it firsthand. And so we're at 99.2% now. Earlier in the year, it was probably a little less, or?
That's our average up to this
Average,
point. So,
okay.
And I should point out that that is just mainstream routes. We removed SPED out of it because there are some other issues with special needs. There's some students that take longer to load, and so this is just looking at mainstream.
Perfect. And I understand compensation is very important. And you showed that the people showed up for the interview, but then when offered it, then they turned it down because of compensation. Did they not know what the compensation was when they showed up for the interview, or they were offered something better? I'm just trying to figure out if our communication isn't that we're offering.
Yeah, if they do their research, they can see the range that's offered. When Tim and I interview, we're not at liberty to say if we hire you on, it's going to be this rate. So we do the reference checks and all that, and it gets sent to HR, and then HR aligns them where they feel they should be, and then they make the phone call.
And I hire people all the time, and I understand they don't read the job description sometimes, and so that might be the thing. But I also wanted to ask, or when I reached out to you about the middle schools and being late, and you had brought up the amount of time in between elementary school and middle school being an issue, and in the way the policy was and voting on it years ago. Is there something, do you think that it would be better and we would set drivers up for success if we were able to alter that schedule a little bit? And then in addition, it was windy today. I can't imagine driving the buses in the wind. Those type of things affected, and it was an early release day as well. So I don't know if you were late today, or if there was any lateness today, but having the middle schoolers wait around for 20 minutes could be an issue for middle schoolers.
Yeah, it's been happening for many years. Our hands are kind of tied. It would be nice to have.
What would be your suggestions? Yeah, what would help to set up for success? I know that, it would be hard to go later than 4 o'clock. You mentioned that, parents didn't like that, but is there something that could make sense that we could alter, change a policy so that we can set you up for success?
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of time between bell times. I know there's a set number of minutes for each grade level that they have to be in school, so we're limited on how we can adjust it. But on the back end, elementary to middle school is tight on early release days. We're down to, between the two bells ringing, we have 35 minutes to load elementary, take them all home, and already be lined up at the middle school. So, and on a normal day, we have 45 to 50 minutes for that. So.
So adding an extra 10 to 15 minutes in the middle is...
Right, and I'd want to take a look at it in more detail because there's other factors that play into it with preschool bell times and some of the middays as well. So, I mean, it's something I would be happy to look into, but that would be about my only suggestion. And I think the middle school bears the brunt of it because they're the third tier, so whatever trickle effect between tiers 1 and 2, it just all gets pushed down.
I'm just, middle school's sitting idle for 20 minutes, they could get into some trouble amongst each other. Or
that's the one time they love the bus, right?
Right, exactly.
Other than that, they
I'm
hate
sure.
it, but when it finally shows up,
sure.
they're happy.
I'm sure of it. I'd like that if we could talk about that, and that could be something that we could bring up, to help out, because we want to set you up for success so that you're not having to rush and you don't have to deal with it. And Mrs. Reese brought up the here comes the bus. I also have parents who turn off the notifications because they start getting them every day. And so then when something does happen, then they are like, what happened? Well, you turned off your notifications. Yeah. So turning those on, even though, they might end up in your email, but it is important to be able to see. And I appreciate, like I said, when I reached out to you and asked you questions about, and I had a question with the app, or an issue with the app, and you were very helpful for that.
President Schultz, members of the board, what we will do is what we do whenever there's these tasks and questions, bring all the people with the multiple parts to the puzzle together in the room to make sure that we have explored every opportunity. If there are opportunities or challenges that weren't considered before, would they make sense now with where we're at? From required instructional minutes to additional components and schedules, with what we currently have available, with his resources, if anything could or should be adjusted, we will bring back recommendation.
Perfect. And just in your opinion, where would we need to fall to be competitive to not have a shortage of drivers?
Again, that's a loaded question because the districts
I know,
do
I'm
this.
sorry.
And as much as I hate to say it, will fall to the middle of the pack, and then the other districts will have a board meeting and a presentation, and it's just going to do this. I mean, $50 an hour.
I would like that as well.
Yeah, we would be fully staffed, right? So, no, I think it's good to be in the middle.
Yeah, everybody will all put our application.
Our two biggest competitors are Queen Creek and Chandler.
Okay.
Queen Creek came to the game this year. They were quiet for a while. They have really stepped up advertising, they've incentives and all that, and they're, from what I understand, almost fully staffed right now. So I would say those are our two competitors to keep an eye on.
So we just need Mr. Moore to find us another $25 an hour, I think, right? Any other questions?
President Schultz, Mr. Crosby, I'd like to know if there's, if we have any financial mechanism, like future contracts or financial agreements through the state where we can fix the fuel cost against future increases for coming years, or do we just have to buy as we go? We all know, recently gas dropped, but it's going to go back up, and are we going to have that? I want to make sure that when it does go back up, that we are covered for that increase in cost.
Great question. I'm actually glad you brought that up. But we get sent fuel pricing every day by multiple companies, and we actually track it on a graph. It's in the lobby of our office. We try to track it really closely. We're not buying fuel just from Circle K or Chevron. We have our own fueling station, and we are able to purchase fuel through the Arizona Department of Transportation, ADOT, so we're paying the same price that they do for their fleet. We're able to piggyback on their contract. So,
And then how often are bus routes evaluated, changed for maximization, and what other avenues can the district pursue to lower fuel cost mileage driven?
So we do use routing software through Tyler Technologies, and that's probably our biggest asset in determining which routes are efficient. It creates all sorts of modules and simulations for us where we can improve. Some of the suggestions we can take and implement. Others just don't make sense based on student counts and things of that nature. But every summer, every route is essentially torn apart and rebuilt. A lot of them stay the same because the neighborhoods are the same and things like that. But essentially, we start fresh every year. And then throughout the year, as buses become overcrowded or undercrowded, we're always balancing that out. Mainstream routes in our district have essentially stayed the same for the past 3 years. They're all fairly efficient. And as you can imagine, sped routes change every day. Did Shauna leave? They're always changing. So those routes, we always try to leave a little room on because oftentimes there's a time constraint of getting a student started and fairly quickly for Shauna. So.
Thank you for that. Also, on page 11, I noticed that the districts that we're utilizing to compare us to is different than, let's say, what the Auditor General would use as a comparison to Higley. Why aren't we using those schools that the Auditor General is using for our financials that would give us a more accurate number instead of comparing us to so many districts that, although I like the fact that we're comparing ourselves to Ben Franklin and ALA, it's nice to see the difference, but I'd like to be able to see the same comparison that the Auditor General uses.
We can look at that. I don't know how valid the data will be because our bus drivers live in our area, so those are our competitors of who's going to snag up our bus drivers as far as rates of pay. If I'm hearing your question correctly, one of our comparison districts may be, on the west side of town, and we're clearly not going to have a driver that lives in Gilbert drive over there for an hourly salary change. So, okay. But we can certainly look at who are.
Yeah. President Schultz, Member Van Hoek, that the Auditor General comparison districts is but for similar size and budgetary reasons. And so while Mr. Crosby's comparison chart works at just competitiveness in terms of employees and basically our surrounding districts and who we can basically attract, these are our main competitors in terms of employees. The comparison districts on the Auditor General report are by size. And so, like he stated, we have several comparison districts that are in the West Valley, North Phoenix, and so polling their hourly rate would not necessarily make complete sense in this case, but maybe polling their route miles or their comparison on that avenue in terms of their expenditures for transportation would be a fair comparison.
I'm just thinking a bigger school would obviously have more money so that they would be able to pay a little more, and obviously like Gilbert and Queen Creek, and even Mesa. I mean, Mesa's huge, so their funding would be way more than ours. So I think that would make a difference when we compare them to us. So that's the only reason why I ask. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying. Just the fact that the reason why we have the shortage is because of the other districts, and that's what he's trying to show from this, correct? So while Mesa is a larger district, they're our direct competitor because they can pay more, and so we're short 7 drivers from the slide I remember right now, and one of the reasons, and the biggest reason is compensation because we can't keep up.
It's a difficult position because once they have that CDL, they can drive commercial vehicles for anyone. Other school districts, they'd probably hire them, walk in the door, and they might drive that afternoon. And I also wanted to bring up, since we're talking about CDLs, the exact same CDL that our employees have here, or any school bus driver in the state of Arizona, also allows them to drive water trucks, trash trucks, and other large commercial vehicles. And to be honest with you, 2 of the people that left us this year are driving for the Town of Gilbert Trash Department. And I'll just say that it's kind of sad that we value and pay a trash truck driver more to haul trash than we do our own children, but that's,
So, sorry, one thing, so I know that a lot of times it's retired professionals that come to get their license and then they want to drive. Is there anything that we can do to offer where they could split the time? Like maybe they don't want to commit to, every day of the week, or they have a vacation, they're going to Florida, things like that, where we could hire, I don't know, 2 people to alternate or
we're currently doing that.
Okay.
So yeah, we have some drivers that only work a couple hours a day and they
Okay.
split it with someone else that only wants to work a couple. So when we can make it work, we certainly do. And we figure even a partial day's work is better than none at all,
So they could do something where it's like a month and then another person works a month or something. I'm just trying to think of.
Yeah, I don't know that we've
outside
gotten into the
box,
month
too.
and month, but we've done AM and PM where it's split and things like that. So.
Thank you.
President Schultz, that's a good point. We also had talked about at one point, because our drivers, like you said, they're split shifts and everything, where we were running low on like lunch aids and things like that, that during that middle portion of the day, can they drive in the morning, go to a school, be a lunch aid, help there, and go back and drive? So essentially, we can give them a full day's work, even though it is different roles and responsibilities. So I know we had looked at that, and I know some were kind of doing that, but that's also, I think we need to explore that, because I believe all of our schools still need that, and it keeps them busy, and that it doesn't, the only time it interferes is those early release days, which obviously, sorry, the school's got to give so we can get kids from there, but so I think those are also good opportunities, and I think, I appreciate you asking about why are we looking at these ones, because they're our competitors, and unfortunately, this is a conversation we have all the time when it comes to compensation, whether it's a bus driver, whether it's a teacher. These much larger districts, Chandler, Mesa, they're our neighbors. They're huge districts. They have huge budgets, which essentially gives them buying power and gives them the ability to offer higher salaries for teachers, for bus drivers, for essentially any position within their district, which makes it difficult for us as a smaller district that we can't offer the same. And that's part of why it's also been our district's focus on how we treat people. That sometimes it's not always about the amount that they're paid, but how they're treated. And sometimes it takes going for that larger salary to be like, ooh, nope, I liked my home. Right? I mean, it's like, yeah, that larger salary was great, but they don't even know who I am, where, as a much smaller district, we're much more inclusive. We know who people are. I see Mr. Crosby. We can't give you enough props here, but I've seen where on the HUSD parent page, someone would post something about the bus, and Mr. Crosby's like, here's my number, call me, I'm happy to help. And I mean, it's his work number, but he's putting it out there on social media for everyone, anyone, you're always willing to help, and we're much larger than your one bus that when you started, or was it?
It was 7 buses, but
Okay.
one sounds pretty good.
I was going to say, or was it a tractor pulling a trailer with kids?
It was a horse-drawn carriage. But
I mean, you've seen our district grow and everything. So the kids running across the field, wait, the tractor left without me. So, it's our ongoing conversation on our budget with our competition. Those are our closest neighbors. Those are the ones we compete for employees, and they have much larger budgets. So it's so much more important that our culture is what it is and what we've worked really hard for, to really make people feel valued and want to be here, because we just can't compete all the time in that salary area. So are we still doing incentives?
We do have a referral incentive through June of this year, so this summer it'll expire.
Okay, so we're still trying to do referrals for other people. Okay, thank you.
Something else to keep in mind with the salary as well as benefits, the larger districts have more people to play into those benefits as well. So if we can't offer the same benefits, but offering salary to help keep us competitive is also a benefit.
Thank you. Couple things. First of all, I remember back whenever I was helping out with benefits when I worked here, and we went to the transportation department, and walking into the back, it really was like a family. You can't speak enough for this department. So working wages and working where you feel respected and you have good leadership, it absolutely is true. The wage competition, no matter what aspect of education, is always, whatever department you look at, there's going to be a challenge. I think we were able to not fix, but make better for substitute teaching with the company that we use. Is there anything similar to that for transportation? And maybe that's not a company.
Yeah, I'm not familiar
Somebody
with
can
that.
speak. All right. Thank you. All right,
Hold
thank you.
tight, I'll be covering that soon.
I will just add off of Christina's Reese story back in the day. We'll end on a positive note, but we did have bus delays from time to time because the sheep were crossing from one field to the other and the road was blocked. So we're past that now. We just have other delays, but just a little memory there. So
Thank you, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you
Any
all.
other questions? I just want to say that while Ben Franklin and ALA are on here, it's not a fair comparison, as they're not required to do the busing that we're required to do as well. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Moving on to 6.3. Oh, sorry, 6.2. I'm sorry. Mr. Moore, just kidding. Review of the 2023-2024 maintenance and operations budget.
Thank you, President Schultz and members of the board. Tonight, we're presenting our second review of the fiscal 2024 maintenance and operations budget. As I mentioned earlier, it's a perfect segue as we will talk about our recommended compensation increases for next fiscal year, which does have a heavier impact on our classified hourly group, which includes our transportation drivers. Just as a reminder, here's our budget timeline. So we are always working, it seems like we're always working one fiscal year back and then looking forward. But this is the budget that we're discussing today. We are working towards that June 2023 timeline where we officially propose and adopt the budget. So all this conversation is regarding that proposed and adopted budget that we're discussing today. And then the timeline into next fiscal year would be as follows. If in December, if we needed a budget revision, we'd bring that back to the board. That is if the budget that we adopted exceeds 1% of what we adopted, then we are statutorily required to bring that back. We did have to do that this year, if you recall, back in December 13th. And in May, we have to do a final revision to true up to the 100-day ADM count. That is required by statute. And then June, we get to do it all over again. So it seems like I'm constantly talking budget. Here's our budget acronyms. So again, there's been a public comment and a board comment that I know we use a lot of acronyms, and so this is for our viewers online or anybody listening. This is a slide to reference for all the acronyms that are in this presentation tonight. All right, so looking at the fiscal 2024 highlights, not as much has changed since the first review. The aggregate expenditure limit that was exempted this year, but as I stated earlier, this budget is looking towards next year. And so that exemption that was passed at the Senate was an exemption for fiscal 23, so this current year. There was no exemption for fiscal 24. So yes, we will face the aggregate expenditure limit again next year. I do not know what that limit will be yet. I think early Estimates come out in May by ADE, and so we'll get a good indication of what that budget implication would be for our fiscal 2024 budget. Other budget implications, we know the Arizona State Retirement System is increasing by 0.12%. That increase is both incurred by the district and the district employees, as both are members of the Arizona State Retirement System. So we do know that will be affecting the district to the tune of about $60,000, and to our employees, 0.12% on their paycheck. Bullet point number 2, our M&O transfer to capital for our middle school lease payment. I do have a full slide to discuss our new lease payment. Lease refinance did not get rid of our lease, but rather refinance our lease to reduce our payment. So that estimated payment is $3.55 million, down from in previous years, which we have been carrying over $4.4 million. Again, I have another slide to further dive into that. In addition, we are transferring additional M&O to support our capital needs. I highlighted that amount of $6.6 million in our capital presentation, and that supports that capital budget that I presented. When was that? February 8th. Bullet point number 4, the only real assumption that we know or that we're taking into consideration in this budget is the estimated 2% inflation adjustment to the base level support. So in statute, it states that if realized inflation is over 2%, statutorily, the legislature should appropriate 2%, at a minimum 2%, to the base level support. And the base level support is the per pupil amount that schools are funded in the state funding formula. The third section there, employee insurance enhancements, we're still researching options, and as I mentioned previously, this budget cycle and our insurance cycle are 2 different timelines, and they're not tied together. So as we talk about compensation increases and contracts, employees signing that does not obligate them to insurance plans. And so those are 2 timelines. There's this whole separate insurance enrollment, in which Ms. Karen Johnson will have a presentation in April about our benefits package for next fiscal year. I will note our benefits survey has went out to all employees. I did talk to Isabel Magnato, our benefits coordinator, and she said that it's been well received and there's been a lot of input already. So we were going to leave that open through next week, collect that information, summarize it, and work with Kairos, our insurance administrator, to fiscally outline what some of those enhancements would be budgetarily. Just to note, we would not be funding those enhancements from the M&O budget. As I mentioned earlier, our switch from fully insured to self-insured has saved the district some funds. And so we're looking to put those back to the employee and help offset, we may not be able to do as much in compensation, but if we can help in benefits, that's still gonna help their take-home pay. And so we're gonna put that money back to use. More to come on that as we collect information and work through our insurance administrator through our renewal process. So AEL, again, I know I keep talking about this, but it's not going away. Fiscal impact to 2023, there is no impact as that was exempted. I do want to note that, again, that gives us full budget capacity for this year. So the budget we adopted is the budget we can use. The impact of fiscal 2024, there may be a potential operational impact as we work through the recommendations. Later in this slide, you'll note that we'll potentially be tapping into some of our budget contingency. And I know, Ms. Reese, I can see you cringing over there, but we do not have the luxury to continue to set aside the amount of money that we've been doing for the AEL. We do not have, we proposed a bond that failed, and so now we've been balancing our budget by transferring M&O dollars to capital to support that, as well as trying to balance offering a competitive salary, as well as all the increases that we've incurred in terms of insurance and basic cost of living increases across the board, utilities, et cetera. So I just want to know there may be a potential operational impact. I do not know what that is yet. As I stated, the first pass at what that limit would be or what the districts would be exceeding that limit in fiscal '24 will be in May. And ADE will send us that information, and I will be certain to include that in a report to the board. So some good news. We did close on our middle school refinance. This chart here is outlining just 3 fiscal years, but this is a 30-year term is what we refinanced. So how you read this is on top. So we have our fiscal year. We have our old payment and our new payment, and then we have a savings column. And so going across, starting in fiscal '24, you'll see our old payment, principal payment, $985,000 compared to our new principal payment, $870,000. The next column outlines the interest for both the old and the new. And then the next column outlines the additional fees. And this is where you'll see the biggest change, right? The previous lease had various fees associated with it. We've talked about these in a board presentation. It included fees to maintain the buildings in which the leaser was responsible and owned the buildings. They were obligated to maintain them. We can argue whether they were maintained or not, but there's also additional fees for basically insurance because we did not own it. We also insured the buildings, so we were double paying insurance, but we could not rely on the leaser when it came to coverage, and other various fees. And so those equated to about $515,000 on an annual basis. And when you take those out, as well as the final interest that we settled on in our new refinance, those estimated savings for fiscal '24 are $620,000, which is money right back to our operational budget. So again, I can't emphasize how big a win this is. The lease is not gone, but it does reduce the financial impact to the district to the tune of $620,000, which can go a long way in addressing teacher pay or other compensation areas where you'll see recommendations later. If you roll that out through 30 years, that net cash flow difference is about $18.6 million. So again, that's $18.6 million back into the operational budget over the next 30 years. So a big win for the district, and definitely something to be happy about, even though we still have a lease, but it is better terms and to the district's favor. Okay, so the M&O 2024 projections, the FY23 estimated revised budget. So this has not changed. Again, this budget was revised in December 14th. We had to make a revision due to the district exceeding 1% of its adopted budget. That budget was revised to $119,873,246. Again, that does not, we have full authority to use that budget as the AEL was exempted, and that does include a budget balance carry forward of $23 million. Looking to 2024, our estimated proposed general budget limit, we'll continue to project no ADM increase as we've done in previous years. As I mentioned earlier, we're the one thing that we are putting into this estimate is our projected 2% increase to the base level support. We do know the ASRS is increasing, and so that is taken into consideration. And then one thing that changed from the first review was the trued up number of the M&O transfer to capital. So we were initially earmarking $10 million, which showed basically a lesser estimated JBL increase. And so the difference in why that's increased over the first presentation is because we finalized our capital plan, which was reviewed with the board earlier this month. And that transfer is $6.6 million instead of the $10 million that we originally estimated. So we worked that down a little, and so that is why that has increased. We are currently realizing a budget balance carry forward of approximately $26 million. A lot of that is due to vacancy savings. We do still have some COVID relief funding that's expiring at the end of this year, and that's having a budgetary impact. We're holding that because all those items will now come back into the budget next year, and so that will quickly go away as we look at fiscal '25 budget, but that's a little bit down the road, so one budget at a time, right? I do want to highlight that the total estimated increase is the 4.3 million from our current revised budget to our estimated proposed fiscal 24 budget. So we do know some more about some of our fixed cost increases. If you remember previously, these were all to be determined. We have worked with some of our insurance carriers to identify some of these increases. First, property casualty insurance. We have heard already preliminary increases of 5% to our property casualty insurance. That equates to $40,000. Workers' compensation is about 2% increase. That equates to $10,000. And then annually, every year, we do hold an FTE contingency. That has been reduced this year. Typically, we've held up to $500,000. And welcome to Higley. Karen, you get a reduced contingency. That is going to be $300,000 this year going into next year. And so of that contingency / reclassification. And so what that $300,000 is used for, if we experience any sort of enrollment growth or additional needs, we basically utilize that contingency to address that enrollment growth. So this year, I can tell you that has been largely used at the secondary level with Mr. Lotzenheiser in terms of 6/5. That Williamsfield has seen drastic enrollment growth, far more than expected. And so a lot of that has used with 6/5 because we were unable to hire teachers, so teachers have picked up additional shifts. The remaining dollars in there, the $69,350, was reclassifications for employees that were hired in the fiscal year 2019-2020. During that time, the district did not offer any sort of experience. And so what has happened is it's created some inequities in our salary schedule. And so those employees can literally quit today and be hired back for more money. And so working with Ms. Johnson, we feel like we need to address those because that is not, I don't think it's an equitable situation. So that is that $69,000. Moving down the list, the utility increases. These are drastic this year. Water, electricity, all those we have received word that they're all going up. So we have budgeted $275,000 for those increases. And that's, again, for all our additional utilities, so water, electricity. And I'm sure as consumers in the community have all seen that cost increase as well. The big saver here is a removal of contracted services. And so what we are recommending for next year is we currently contract out custodial and grounds at 6 of our elementary schools. We did that this year out of a need if we could not fill the positions. And so if the board remembers, that a lot of this stemmed from COVID too, in which we had increased custodial needs. We have maintained those, and those we still haven't been unable to fill the positions. So this year we took initiative and contracted it out for the whole fiscal year. With some changes that we are recommending today, as well as working with the maintenance department, we have been able to rehire a number of positions and are currently almost fully staffed in custodial. And so we feel confident that we'll be able to fill basically those 6 schools, both custodial and grounds, going into next year with our own internal staff. And if you've contracted anything, you will know that it costs greatly more than what it would if you can bring it in-house. And so that is that $1 million that we will be realizing in terms of savings into next year. Go ahead.
Can I just ask you, on the contract, the savings is great. I just have a question. Do we have a contingency? Like, what happens if we aren't able to hire? Sorry.
So that number includes contingency. The total contracted costs are closer to $1.4 million.
Okay.
We did hold some contingency in there because while I'm optimistic, I still need to be realistic, and we still have a need at our schools. And so yes, that number does have some contingency in there.
Okay, thank you.
President Schultz, to that point, so this is a savings for not having internal contracted staff?
This is a savings from moving to internal. We're currently contracting, and so to the tune of $1.4 million. If we eliminate contracted services, we will not have to pay that anymore. And we can bring those staff on board.
Okay, so I'm thinking the other way. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so you total those up, and that's actually a decrease to our fixed costs, and this is an anomaly in most fiscal years. I will note that because of the removal of contracted services, it's actually savings of $305,000. Next is our fiscal 2024 proposed compensation increases. So we've worked with Meet and Confer, as well as with administration and departments on our compensation plan. Previously, we have presented the board with options. This year, we are not privy to, providing the board with options. We feel, at a minimum, this is a recommendation the district should proceed forward with. So starting at the top, teachers and other certified staff. Other certified staff include your OT, PT, instructional aid, or instructional coaches, other various staff that support our instruction. A 2% increase from the M&O budget, which equals $950,000. The bullet point 2 would also increase $1,250 to their classroom site fund planned. And so that's another bucket. That is another 2% from the classroom site fund bucket. That's Fund 10. So that is not included in that cost. So the 2% is the $950,000, and that's what's being proposed from the M&O budget. But in total, the compensation increase would be 4%. Classified hourly staff, I think you just heard from Mr. Crosby, just one of our departments that have a high vacancy in terms of classified hourly staff. All his bus drivers are classified hourly. You can consider it in that category, as well as our landscaping, custodial, grounds, areas where we've experienced a number of vacancies and basically unable to fill positions. We're proposing a $1 an hour increase straight to all classified hourly employees, as well to our salary schedule, in an effort to help move the needle forward. We know these employees are some of our lowest paid and probably our hardest hit with inflation. And so this increase, $1 an hour, is an average of 5.5% increase. And so it was definitely a point of emphasis with district administration, as well as Meet and Confer's support, that increase. Down to administration and classified exempt. These are our principals, our department heads, and our managers. We propose a 2% increase at $150,000. In addition, we've talked about adding on to the budget cycle increases to our supplemental schedules and also a one-time stipend. So the first bullet point, a $750 stipend to all employees as an employee recognition. As I've mentioned, we've been realizing a lot of one-time savings, and so rather than hold that, we want to put that back to our employees in an effort to show our recognition to all the work they've done. In addition, our activities and coaching supplemental schedules, we would propose adding a 2% increase to those, as those have also stayed stagnant for many years. In addition, sub-pay, adding it to our annual budget cycle. So if you recall, this year, mid-year, we brought a sub-pay addition, and we're always being reactive. And so the goal of bringing this increase, $5 is approximately 2.5%. So we rounded up. We didn't want to put $4.25 on there. Is to be proactive in an effort to stay ahead of districts and continue to be able to fill our sub-positions at a high rate. This makes it easier on me budgetarily because I know what the budget's going to be throughout the year rather than switching gears mid-year. But I understand the need when we do that. So this was an effort to be proactive, increase that sub-pay along with the total compensation plan. So just highlighting that compensation plan and what it will do for our proposed teacher salary schedule. Up top, you can read, this would be our proposed teacher salary guidelines for fiscal year 23-24. A base that includes the classroom site fund would be at $51,476. The pay for performance and supplemental, that is all paid from that classroom site fund. Again, it's not M&O dollars, that's a separate bucket. That's 6/10 sales tax from the state. They just renewed that a couple of years ago, so that goes through 2042. That would be the remaining portion of their salary of $4,700 for a total salary of $56,226. Looking at a teacher salary comparison in the East Valley, we don't know much. The only district that we do know has made an increase is Queen Creek, and that increase is 2%, and that's reflected here. Based on what they've posted online and what we know, that these amounts do include their classroom site fund allocation. So it is a comparable apples to apples comparison, with the exception of we do not know what they're going to do for fiscal 24 on the 4 districts that are asterisked. So this does put it as a leader for now, but I do want to know, again, we do not know what other districts are doing, and if Chandler, I've heard rumors that they're in the 4% range, that would put them right up to where we are. So I do want to note that. You have a question?
No. It was a speculation that I didn't want to speculate.
Did I clarify it?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
President Schultz, members of the board, if you'll recall, this is
Mike.
huge. President Schultz, members of the board, if you'll recall, this has been a huge focus for us, as 3 years ago we were one of the very lowest paying, and this has been a huge priority for us. And this is why this year is unique. Instead of coming to you with the same percentage for each employee group, we're being very intentional and thoughtful and making sure that we're recognizing across the board in all areas as we work to maintain competitive and attract people to Higley, as we've identified as a huge priority in multiple areas on our strategic plan.
So taking all those into consideration and putting those in a summary, this is the total budget impact. And so if on slide 7, we talked about the 2024 estimated general budget limit increase of 4.3 million. On slide 8, we talked about the fixed cost decreases. So that's an addition of 305,650 in terms of budget capacity. The total salary compensation increases totals just over 5 million. And so that's a net position of negative 399,000. That negative budget implication, we would propose reducing our fiscal 2024 budget balance carry forward to balance that budget. As I noted earlier, we are slated to carry over 26 million. So I feel confident that that budget balance carry forward can support this net budget decrease. And with that, we work to our budget calendar. February 8th, as I mentioned, we provided the first review. Tonight, we're providing a second review of the budget. March 8th, if there is any further question or discussion regarding the budget, I'll be more than happy to do another information presentation. But if there is no further discussion, I will just bring a tentative approval of the M&O budget as an action item for approval. We will also have the second review for capital budget, and then on April 5th, we'll bring the tentative approval for our capital budget to move forward with our capital projects. And then legally in June, we will adopt this same budget that we've talked about today. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to.
President Schultz.
Mrs. Reese?
This makes me very nervous. I've had long discussions with Mr. Moore on contingencies and making sure that we're covered, because as we saw tonight with Mr. Crosby's presentation, we would not have projected our fuel increases the way they were. And diesel continues to stay really high as well, and just going up. And so thank you for putting it all together. It does make me nervous, because just as we had this conversation last year, and I remember Mrs. Wilson having the conversation with our building, and we could not have expected we knew costs were coming up, but we could not have expected it to look like this. So, so I am concerned with what we take forward for unexpected costs. I'm hoping for the next year it looks better than it does this year. hopefully we're more on the recovery versus continuing. So I appreciate you taking the time and putting it together, and I know it's been kind of a ongoing conversation and joke with us, because you never know what's going to happen and what we're going to have to do, and what those costs are going to be. So, I mean, I agree. I think it looks great. At least right now, we can see Higley kind of leading that compensation, because as we just said, we don't see that very often. And it has been a focus of ours. So I appreciate putting the budget together, and that's very important, especially just as everyone else, our teachers and their families are going through the same thing. They have increased costs and everything. So it makes me uncomfortable, not to the point where I'm like, oh, no, but I'm leery, because I don't know what's going to happen, if we're going to be better or worse next year. But I also have to say, thank you, because you're probably one of the very few who could refinance something right now and actually save money. So that's just not happening right now. So thank you for going through all that and refinancing our leases, and we're actually saving money. So that's certainly helpful that we can put towards our employees. So I just wanted to say thank you on getting that done, and you've done a nice job putting it together. It does make me a little nervous. And as we move forward, hopefully things will start to look better, not worse.
Mrs. Reese, thank you. I am fearful that it is going to be worse. And it's just the reality that we're in. I wish we were in a different place right now. It's sad where we're at. But Mr. Moore, I know, is very thorough and finds different ways to be able to keep us afloat. And we do have to pay our teachers and our staff to be able to have good staff and to teach our kids. And we don't want to cut programs. And so I appreciate the juggling that you do with the budget. And I hope that we can be in a better place. I just am fearful it's going to get worse.
President Schultz, something that I would like to add to that, I guess, is we look at the slide that shows what we had to pay for contracting out. If we can't afford to get our staff, which I recognize, ultimately you don't want to get too ahead of yourself when it comes to what budget you have. But if we don't do those things and then we still can't support that staff, it ends up being far costlier, right? Like in the grand scheme of things. So I feel like it is risky, and I understand that, but at the same time, the trade-off seems worse if we don't have that and things get worse, because then we have to contract out. I mean, at the end of the day, we still need custodial services, we still need these types of things, and we can't not do them. So as risky as it is, I argue that it's riskier to not, just because of how expensive contracted work will only increase as well.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. So I spoke to a few people who had concerns. Obviously, we want to see our staff paid well, but last year there was a 6% increase, and then the $5 million more in salary increases this year. They feel like it's this forever budget that just items that keep going to the M&O. And what happens if voters refuse an M&O extension in a few years? And what plans do we have for that long term to ensure that this is, able to continue and not just a one-time?
Yeah, so everything we propose tonight, with the exception of the classified hourly, matches the increases in budgets that we're assuming from the state. If you reckon it, the 2% is the 2% that we realize or expected to realize from the state. And so that's just a dollar for dollar or percentage for percentage offsets. We're not essentially increasing costs with the exception of classified hourly, but we're basically matching everything we're getting from the state additional is going right back to our teachers. You brought up a good point in terms of our M&O override. We are slated to need a renewal for fiscal 2024. in which we'll need a voter-approved election to renew that. If that is not renewed in fiscal '24, the immediate impact for fiscal '25 will be approximately $3 million. And then for fiscal '26, another $8 million. And then fiscal '27, that'd be completely expired, and that's $13 million that's currently providing additional M&O. So yeah, it is a concern. The M&O override, if you looked into what that is approved for, it is approved for a lot of our extracurriculars. And so that is currently what that's funding. So if that were not to pass, I hate to say this, but we would go there first because that is what that is funding. It's funding those extracurriculars, our arts, our music. There is a portion that's funding staff increases as well. And so there could be potential for salary freezes. And so that is an impact, but it is on the table too, and we're realistic of that, or forward thinking and looking at that. But we can't stay stagnant and sit on money and not put it back to our staff when realized inflation is close to 7 and 8%. That's not going to change. That is reality. And so we do have to make forward progress as aligned to our strategic plan and what we've approved, and be optimistic and that some of those overrides will be approved. But if not, we will go to directly what those are funding and go to make cuts in those areas first.
I did a comparison. I mean, we're doing another $6.6 million from M&O to capital. And it seems like we're transferring so much dollars to capital so often. When doing the comparison to other districts, Higley was at like 83% in our M&O dollars, where other districts are like 12% and lower, sometimes some even 7%. And you know, community members are concerned about the fact that we're so much higher than other districts in capital.
Yeah, and so that's a fair comparison, but looking at Higley Unified, we do not have a bond. We do not have a capital override. A lot of our neighboring districts or comparison districts in the peer and the other general peer groups have these additional capital revenue sources, and so we do not. And so we budget according to what Higley has, and so we do have capital needs in excess of our capital budget, which is $6 million a year. If you remember from our first review, our capital proposed budget is about $17 million. And if you look at that, it's hard. We've already made some cuts. I have a hard time cutting more. And so, yes, we do fund a large portion of our capital budget from our M&O because that is the reality of Higley's budget and how we have to maintain our schools.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Moore. I appreciate it. And I'm hopeful that our community will come through for us and we'll continue to fund everything that we do. Now, moving on. Yeah, you can ask another question.
I do have more questions, sorry. Just not on that page. Now, the hiring freeze on page 5, that would only be if AEL didn't pass again next year?
Ms. Van Hoek, that's a potential impact, as we don't know the implication just yet. As I stated, like in May, we'll have, I think ADE provides us the first pass of what that, they take the cumulative budgets of all the districts and figure out what that limit is, and then we'll get a percentage of what that would impact Higley, what that AEL will be for Higley. And so we'll take that percentage, reduce that from our budget and see where we land. I just put that's proposed because I don't know what that limit is. And so I want to be fully transparent in what may occur. And I don't want to hide anything because I don't know what that limit is going to be for next year.
And then with the $1 increase, so you said that that's 5.5%, is what it equates to. Now, is there a way that, I'm guessing you've already looked at options to be able to possibly, cut somewhere else to be able to pay our bus drivers extra, because if it wasn't for our bus drivers, our kids wouldn't be in school for them to be taught. And, obviously that's tied to money coming into the district based on the number of children. So I know with the ESSER funds, we hired several counselors. Now, because those funds are going to be going away, how are we going to fund those counselors after the fact? And then is there a way to maybe, I know administration increase was what, 150? Yeah. Yes. So I don't know if maybe like even 0.5% can go from there to our bus drivers. I just want to make sure that we do take care of them as well, and knowing that they're at the bottom compared to other districts, to be able to help them out.
Yeah, so to answer the bus driver question first, so this $1 an hour will put us, we've worked with Mr. Crosby, we feel like it will make us competitive and put us in the middle of that pack. It would be $19.33, which would put us just above Mesa, but right under Gilbert. He does feel like that would be a competitive wage. We've also made a recommendation going into next year to honor up to 6 years experience. It was one area in which we were only offering 4. And so experienced bus drivers were being capped at 4 years experience. And so we've worked with Ms. Johnson to basically say, hey, this is another area in which we can basically attract qualified, experienced drivers and compensate them for their experience while still maintaining equity. I do have to note that because I always forget that. But and be able to hire those. So we hope those changes going into next year, and with Mr. Crosby is fully aware of those, he feels confident that he'll be able to fill some of those vacancies. The second part of your question in regards to ESSER 3 budget and the salaries that we have allocated in there, we have been holding in that contingency that salary implication to bring back into the budget. It has definitely been, and Ms. Richards can express this, but a relief to our elementary schools and to have these counselors. While we don't have one at every school, 3 are shared at our 9 elementary. It definitely, those counselors, we are planning to bring those back into the budget. It aligns with our strategic plan. It aligns with everything we do in terms of providing students with resources that they may need. So we have been planning to bring those back in, and we're holding that funds to do that.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, one of the other things is tonight you had an opportunity to look at the bus drivers and their compensation compared with their neighboring districts. We didn't bring you the other areas, which would have been very similar because our increases had been in percentages. We're competing in the same areas for custodial grounds and those things. One of the components when we were talking about transportation, and you looked at one of our competitive districts to the south of us here, they initially were all contracted services, particularly during COVID. And one of the things they did was bring it back in-house because they were spending more on contracted services, but that's why they upped the cost to bring it in, so that you saved where you were being able to bring it back in. And that's one of the pieces that's important for us for all of our classified areas, as well as making sure we're competitive, because we focused tonight on transportation, but if we were to look at all of those other areas, we would find ourselves more on the lower end of the scale than toward the middle. And this is where addressing it at that particular thing for the classified hourly staff will bring us up more competitive in all the areas we're trying to attract and keep people in that are Higley employees rather than contracted services, because that has been a very expensive thing. You saw even in our transportation tonight, one of the pride things that Josh has been able to do is bring back in the contracted services, not sending it out when we needed to get students to football games or other things outside of school days, and we didn't have enough internal people to cover it. So again, whether or not we can hire the people, we still have to provide the services so that schools are clean and we get them there. And that's been kind of an important focus for our team.
President Schultz. And another question I had is, since the employees are already getting a raise, why give an additional $750 bonus to everyone versus targeting the money to where it's needed most, such as, bus drivers, or to bolster pay, versus similar districts?
Certainly. So, I mean, meeting with Meet and Confer and our conversations with district-wide, we've worked vigorously to make sure every employee feels valued. And that is one way I feel like we can do that. That does go to bus drivers as well. And so providing that, and the reason we can't do that into the salary schedules, because the point you brought up earlier, it becomes an ongoing cost. We're realizing savings on a one-time basis, so those are salaries that we cannot, if we make those adjustments, those are budgetary implications going forward. You've made that note earlier. When we have one-time costs, it's basically vacancy savings. And so how can we show our employees recognition and treat and basically put that to use? One of the ways is to do that is employee stipend to all employees.
Thank you.
I think also, since transportation is top of mind because we heard that presentation, but as Mr. Moore said, we want to value all of our employees, and so we don't want to cause shortages in other places if we just bring up one area as well, correct?
Right, and that's, I mean, the salaries being increased across the board. It's just that $750 that I'm talking about. I mean, yes, it's nice to get a bonus, but I just want to make sure that that's that we're utilizing the dollars to where it's most needed. And then also I looked at the average teacher salary for 2022 and 23, the adopted budget, and there we had like in 2022 it said 62,173, and we have 56,226 for 2024, and I wanted to be able to understand why the decrease.
So it's not a decrease. So what is presented on this slide is the starting salary going into fiscal 2024. What's presented on the budget forms in the AFR is the average of all our teachers currently employed in the district. So this could be teachers that have experience up to 20. I don't know if we have 25 years, but I know we have some 20-year teachers. And all our new teacher salaries, we combine all those, average that out, and that is what is presented on the budget forms. This is a starting teacher salary going into next fiscal year. If a new teacher were to apply for our district, that would be the starting wage.
Okay.
To give some context, when I got hired in 2012, the average salary I think was still around in the 60s, and the starting salary was $35,000. So the base is really important for teachers who are looking for places to go, because the base is where you're going to start from, and then you add each year of experience on top of that, or my master's and everything else. So like when I came back, I had 10 years of experience. They only gave me 9, those types of things. And so then it starts at the base salary, and they add, I think on your slide, it's $350 per year of experience, and then your master's and everything else. So when I'm looking around, I don't look for averages. I want to know the base, because that's where I'm going to come in at, if that makes sense.
One other note on the 750, Mr. Moore, we're giving a 2% increase and inflation is at 7%, so we're already behind. And so being able to give 750 to our employees to hopefully help them with some of the cost of inflation is important too. Any other, Mrs. Reese?
Just a quick question on that 750. When would that be paid?
We talked about following this similar as we've done in our retention stipends in the previous fiscal years. And so if an employee signs their contract and returns for next fiscal year and works up until August 31st, would be paid in that either first pay period in September or second pay period in September. So we want to get that into our employees' pockets, as soon as possible.
Okay. I see your thinking on that. But I also noticed our board packet after that August meeting, we had a large resignation list after that. So they stayed long enough to get the stipend that we paid for returning teachers. So I don't know that that was overly successful in that aspect. Just like I said, I think that was probably one of our largest board packets with resignations and pay or that part. I just can't think tonight. So I don't know what the answer is. Do we do it right at the beginning of the school year? Do we do it until August? I mean, I want to get it in their hands. I'm not nearly suggesting that we go later. I'm just wondering if that was overall successful, because in that on our consent agenda for resignations and everything, that was besides the semester, which is normal for people moving. I think that was one of our highest resignations, was after that was paid out.
President Schultz, Board Member Reese, particularly when you're looking at the classified ranks, because our teacher ranks, because of a contract, unless they met one of the criterion in which we would waive it, the fee would have cost them to get out of their contract more than the stipend that they would have gotten. So, and then again, it was, I think, a $1,500 one at that point, but there were individuals who were classified who stayed to get that, and then they went to another district that was paying more per hour. And it was truly a money thing, particularly in the classified hourly range. And hence being, if we can pay them more on their base salary, they won't stay for, I've put in so many years and now I can go and make $2, $3 more an hour in another district. If they're making closer to that, they're more likely to stay. I think the thing that we didn't have going for us, particularly with that employee group, was the additional compensation for the hourly. That played a factor, as we saw when we looked at why they were leaving.
I think also we need to look at, a lot of teachers will travel across cities and sometimes to Phoenix and beyond, and then the pay goes up here, pay goes up there, then they start having to take into consideration the travel. And then, when the salaries change and they have to make a decision, so I think sometimes that plays into it. What, are we talking last year? Is that what you're referencing, or when did this occur?
Just this past
year.
This past August, that they also received a one-time stipend for our renewing employees, those who signed and stayed. And it was, as long as they were employed through the end of August, then they got their stipend.
I remember that, the language. And remind me, I apologize, how many years have we offered this stipend? How many years have we offered this stipend?
So this is relatively new. That's coming from the M&O budget. The 2 previous years were funded from the COVID relief funds. So this will be the 3rd year.
This will be the 3rd year.
Yeah, in which a stipend such as in this characteristic has been offered.
And then, so last year was the 2nd year. The 1st year before that, did we have similar behavior, or was that in language that they stuck around to? Okay, so it's hard to use that data to determine if that was a.
Either people left to begin with. People didn't move around like they did last year. Last year, people were more comfortable and started moving around.
Okay, all right, thank you.
With respect to some of those who left, it might be interesting to look at how many were returning employees versus, because I know we had a lot leave of individuals who, under Ducey's law, to try to help increase the number of teachers that anybody can teach, and I know a lot of them learned that maybe student teaching is kind of important.
President Schultz, Mr. Moore, now, one of my concerns, I've been in the finance world for over 20 years, and I have never seen a budget approved based on a PowerPoint presentation. I am used to seeing Excel spreadsheets, all the line items, all the GL lines, to see all the dollars that are involved in a budget. Obviously, our biggest expenses are salaries and benefits, and tonight we've seen transportation. But for me, it's really important that if we as a board are going to be approving a budget with all these line items, that we should be able to see an Excel spreadsheet of line items. And, you know, I asked if we have study sessions to be able to not just go over the presentation. Yes, this is the third time we're seeing presentation, but not just seeing a PowerPoint presentation, but actually seeing the entire budget, which would also help us understand fully what is in our budget. And I was told, no, we don't have study sessions. But for me, you know, I think it would be irresponsible, at least for me, to approve such a large budget without seeing all the numbers and basing it just off of a PowerPoint presentation that we're being presented. Not that I have a reason not to trust what you're telling us. It's just we need to be able to see that. And obviously, I've scheduled an appointment to be able to meet with you and review those in a little more detail. But I don't know if we all have to do that separately to be able to get a better understanding of it, or if it, you know, or if it doesn't matter to if this PowerPoint is sufficient for everybody else. But at least for me, I just would feel more comfortable approving a budget, being able to see the full details. So that's all. Thank you.
President Schultz, Member Van Hook. Yeah, I mean, we do have a meeting scheduled to go over in greater detail. What this is proposed in March is tentative approval of the budget. This is not the formal approval. The formal approval is done in June, in which we bring you, if you've looked on our website, we do have all our budget forms up on the website. Those are in Excel. They're in great detail. It's our whole general ledger. You can see every single transaction. Those are public on our website. And we'll bring that to you in June. Those forms are not out yet for next year, but districts in Arizona cannot proceed forward and be competitive when other school districts are offering, issuing contracts in March, February. This is the reality in which we are in Arizona. We tentatively approve the budget, and then we come back and formally approve it. But this tentative approval allows us to issue contracts to our teachers and lock in those positions so we know our staffing for next year. If we waited till June, that would be, I'm sure it'll give Ms. Richard a heart attack, not knowing what our staffing is going next month right into the school year. And so that is why we bring this in PowerPoint form, because we do not have the budget forms yet from the state. But we do know tentatively, I know the formula, and certainly we'll go over that when we meet. And how we come to this number. But this is why we go through this process, and then we bring you the formal, full proposed and adopted budget in all its glory, Excel, 9 pages, multiple, the whole GL, basically, in June.
Okay, President Schultz. So I'm glad to hear that we will at some point be able to see that before final approval. And I'm not saying anything that we shouldn't approve it in March, but I want to make sure that we are seeing the details other than just in a presentation form.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, one of the things that we worked with the governing board with over the last 3 years is to bring the information in this form and in this fashion. This was the preferred way, so we could walk you through the process that we were doing on the side, because you hire people who are experts in these areas, who are monitoring this and being compliant with it, which is so formulaic. Previous boards, members, and I think, particularly Board Member Reese could speak to the fact we are bringing more level of detail and explicit in what the process is than has ever historically been brought to a board. And we're working really hard to provide the answers to the questions that you have with the information that we can provide. And so, again, questions we are happy to answer, but this is the process that the multiple reviews of this with additional information was what the board had asked for us to begin to bring to them at the level we bring them, which is why we do it multiple times.
Thank you.
And just as Mr. Moore said, all of this is public information. We are a public entity, and we have to provide this information line by line, and the website and everything. So we're not just looking at a PowerPoint and adopting a budget. Mr. Moore, I know, will sit with you and answer any of the questions you need to understand the budget and go line by line with you, as well as he has done with many of us. I know Mrs. Reese and Mrs. Anderson for sure. So yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And to that point, how often is the one online updated?
It follows this timeline here. So we don't annually change the budget unless we have to. And so we'll adopt and propose in June. Again, we'll revise in December, which we did this year. So you'll see the revised budget posted on our website. You can also compare that to our adopted and proposed if you wanted to see the changes that occurred between June and December. And then in May, we revise again. So at a minimum, you'll see 2 budgets for a fiscal year. But this current year, you're going to see 3 revisions. And so you can compare those each to basically see where the changes were made. I'll also highlight those when I do the revision on a high level on where the changes were in budget. So that's what we do statutorily. Again, in our office, we have a complete team that monitors this regularly. We have a staff. I have a team of about 11 individuals who help with the schools, but also help with the budget process. And all that cumulative work comes into these forms. And so what you see is the culmination of every single transaction in the district into those forms. And so it would be a lot of work to revise those every single month. But at a minimum, you'll see 2 revisions in a fiscal year. And again, this year you'll see 3 because we did exceed our budget in 1% by 1% in December. So.
And whatever's on our website, is that what's also on the ADE website?
Correct. Yeah, you can also find that same information on ADE.
Okay. I just didn't know if whatever was submitted to the state and then updates are being made on our end in the meantime before it's updated again with the state.
No, whatever we formally update or revise, we have to statutorily submit to the state. And so those are both running on the same schedule. So what ADE the state has, the district has as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore. We will now move on to 6.3, the marketing plan with Mrs. Joseph.
President Schultz, members of the board, are going to ask, there's a quick bathroom break here. Members of the board, I'd like to introduce Teresa. She has put together a presentation here tonight. This is something that, if you recall, last April when we were in a study session, we were talking about marketing and our strategic plan and goals and focus areas. And she has been diligently working on this work. And then Miss Teresa Joseph had a baby in October, and so we gave her a chance to come back so that she could present to you. So many of the things she'll talk with you about the 5-year plan. It's an alignment to the work we identified in our study session or our April meeting with you when we meet on a Saturday. And she has got some updates for you as well, and this is a good opportunity for us to discuss the progress we're making. Teresa.
Okay, tonight I'll be discussing HUSD's marketing plan, which is a comprehensive plan to help broadcast all things Higley and better align our marketing strategy moving forward. So our marketing plan was designed to align with the district's strategic 5-year strategic plan that was implemented this school year. So this plan will set the foundation of the district's marketing efforts moving forward for the next 5 years. And as a refresher to members of the audience, the district devised a strategic plan with its third anchor being communication and community relations. So the goal of this anchor is really to engage all stakeholders through transparent, respectful, timely, and consistent communication. So as part of this strategic plan, our district came up with 2022-2023 focus areas, with one of those focus areas being developing a district marketing plan that will help us enhance our relationships with our community. In addition to this, we committed to redesigning the district's website, relaunching the business partner events, and establishing communication protocols for various circumstances to help guide the district in providing effective and informative communication. So tonight we'll be discussing this marketing plan, which also encompasses those other 2022-2023 goals. So you'll find this marketing plan online under About Us and then the strategic plan. So this goes over core marketing goals, target markets, and marketing tools that we plan to use within those 5 years. So tonight we will outline aspects of those core marketing goals and just provide a quick update on what our public relations team has already started to do. So with our core goals, our focus areas are really wide-ranging as there's so many different aspects of marketing when it comes to a school district. Our goal is really to showcase the amazing work of our students, employees, and sites, while also providing thoughtful and consistent communication and broadcasting that messaging to our current audience and our target. So our focus areas are enrollment and employment, re-engaging and expanding partnerships, aligning branding district-wide, and streamlining that process of district-wide communication. So we'll start with enrollment and employment. This has been an important area for us as recruiting employees and enrolling students is absolutely crucial to any school district. Now, before I get started with these slides, I do want to stress that we are already advertising these things. This isn't new. We'll just be taking a different approach these next 5 years with this year and the year to come to really focusing on those analytics to drive our decision making. So we'll be looking at the analytics will decide our strategy and the channels that we will use moving forward. So key areas will, with enrollment, will focus on redesigning our marketing materials to be more engaging and align with our HUSD district branding. So we'll be creating flyers and postcards and social designs that can be shared at Kindergarten Roundup or other HUSD events, and also shared with our sites, at our preschools, at external daycares, and with external partners like HOAs. We will continue to promote enrollment through advertisements. And again, the biggest thing here is with this entire plan is we'll be looking at analytics after each ad that is run to see what has been the most effective strategy. When we advertise through print, for example, we'll be using unique QR codes with each ad to track that success. And with digital ads, we'll be using unique URLs. So we will determine the best advertisements moving forward from there. And again, we'll be advertising across all channels really to spread our bets this next year so we can be more agile and double down on years to come. We plan to relaunch our digital Higley magazine. I know this has been a success in previous years prior to COVID, so we do want to relaunch this. It will be a digital magazine and annual, so it will be at the end of the year to really try to re-engage our families and also provide some district information. And then we will be remaking all schools' enrollment videos and our district-wide About Higley videos, so these will be used for advertisements and other school marketing needs. And as we've begun to analyze our current social media strategy organically, our posts with students have ranked better with sentiment and engagement, so we would like to double down on this specifically during enrollment season. We'll be sharing stories and posts on why our students really love Higley. We want to share the unique aspects of our schools through our students and our parents' eyes. And then with this, we'll also be sharing more student success stories on the website. So as we revamp our website, we really want to drive traffic there. So we've also recently updated our district's video, which can be found on our website. It's a bit longer at 6 minutes, and it discusses all great things in Higley, pre-K through 12. So we have created a shortened video too that's about a minute long, which we'll be showing you tonight. And this is also used for advertisements. So hopefully you've already seen some ads on social media running with them.
Higley Unified School District prepares students for a life filled with limitless possibilities. We are a distinguished district in Arizona that serves more than 13,500 students in the East Valley in grades pre-K through 12. From academics, arts, community involvement, to extracurricular activities, we offer a well-rounded, safe, and inclusive learning environment that puts students first. With 16 schools located in Gilbert and Queen Creek, our exceptional teachers and staff prepare students today to become leaders of tomorrow. Our school district is committed to not only ensuring students graduate high school, but are 21st century ready by cultivating students to be innovative learners, responsible citizens, and college and career-ready scholars. This is Higley Unified School District.
Thank you, Curtis, for putting together such a wonderful video, and you may recognize that voice. It was his as well. So now we'll move on to
Higley Unified.
We loved it so much, we're going to watch it again. So now with employment, so we plan to recreate all of our employment flyers and brochures that can be shared with Arizona universities as well as displayed on our website. So we want to make sure that our benefits are clearly outlined and accessible, and that way our prospective teachers and employees know what makes Higley unique. And as we engage potential partners, we will be launching advertisements, and we already have, that highlight various openings and our job fair. So this will be through LinkedIn or other job platforms, so job boards, and again, utilizing those analytics to drive decision making. And then as we update our website, we will be revamping our human resources page to just ensure all benefits are clearly outlined and accessible. And we are going to be remaking the applicant video. So it was last updated 4 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. And then we will also be doing a Why Work at Higley series. So there are so many great reasons to work at Higley, and we can go on and list them, but hearing from our employees might have a larger impact. And with that Why Work at Higley campaign and the Why I Love Higley that I discussed with the students, those are both evergreen campaigns. So they're really going to be running year-long with more of a push during that enrollment and employment season, but they will be running all the time. And then moving on, another area of focus is partnerships. So we have already launched our business partner breakfast this school year, and it was a tremendous success. So we had over 90 people in attendance. As you can see by this photo, it was a packed room. We had principals and district leadership at each table, just really engaged and talking with our business and community partners. So we are excited that it will be happening again next week, and we are already at capacity and with a wait list. And the breakfast is not the only thing we are doing, so we are also to engage our partnerships. So we are also doing sponsorship brochures for student and employee events like Chinese New Year, Teacher of the Year, Retirement Reception, and Arts Festival. We will also be doing quarterly emails, which will be sent to our community and business partners about upcoming events and just ways they can engage with our community, so they're not just hearing from us twice a year or just when we need sponsors. And then we'll also be engaging with new businesses in building our relationship with the Gilbert and Queen Creek Chamber and sharing positive stories with this network. And then branding, our goal is to align branding district-wide to ensure all schools' marketing reflects HUSD and our updated mission, vision, and core values. So to do this, we will be updating our website to be more user-friendly and accessible. And as we redesign our website and look more closely into those analytics with our advertisements, we will be also looking closely into our conversion rate and other website metrics. So we have currently started to track the top of that funnel with those advertisements, but as we redesign our website and incorporate some of those website tracking mechanisms, we'll begin to analyze the conversion rate as well as other website metrics. And then we will be providing employees with a brand toolkit with various marketing materials like PowerPoint slides and logo design, so we can make sure we're staying consistent. And with that, we'll also be doing style guidelines. So we are currently updating those. So anyone who has access to edit our website or just sending out communication is making sure we're staying on brand. So this isn't just our visual identity, but also making sure our brand voice is aligned as our marketing strategy really builds upon our brand identity. And then lastly, we will be revamping marketing materials. We've already designed business cards and we're working on updated brochures and pop-up banners for all the schools. And so our new website is currently underway, and so we have an expected completion date of April. So around spring break time, it'll be site by site. So you should start to see our new design sometime around spring break with all the sites done sometime in April, which is exciting. And with the new website, it will be a video on our home screen. So as people come to our homepage, they will see a video there. And our last focus area is streamlining communication. So we will be streamlining the communication process by providing guidelines and templates for crisis situations. I will add this is something that we already do. We just want to make sure the process is perfect because when a crisis situation occurs, we need to make sure we are responding accurately and as soon as possible because families do need that communication. And then we will be updating our communication rubric, when to contact who and how to contact. Again, we already have this. We're just refining the process and making sure it's perfect. And then we'll also be providing training on sending out communication. When I was on maternity leave, we already started to do this, and we will just continue to make sure that everyone who needs to be trained is. And with that, does anyone have any questions?
President Schultz? Just a quick question. How can non-current families receive information? How can they opt in to receive emails on what's going on, the Higley Digital? If they're not currently in school, how do they do that?
Yeah, so there is a way on our website, and it's under one of the short links for them to register for communication. They can do it by school or they can do it as the district-wide communication. So there is an option there. It will be just for the community messaging.
This looks great, very fresh. It feels energized. Thank you to everybody involved in this. I remember one of my first emails I think received was a community member making a comment about the pictures online. Why aren't they more of our real, like our students? And it looks like we've met that request and beyond. I don't want Higley to be like a school district because we're unique, but one thing that the district I work in does really well is it is constantly sharing what's going on, and it's us. Like when I run a lab, I take the pictures, I take the video, I send it to our admin. They approve it, and then it's on Instagram. It's, of course, they have their legalities of which students and faces can be on there, but it's great as a teacher to represent these kids, and the kids go out there, and the parents like it, and they share it, and it just spreads like wildfire. And beyond that is, I appreciate as a teacher to see what's going on in the other classrooms and what's going on. I don't get to go, I don't go outside much. Especially working a 6th and being a department chair like theirs, and it's dark when I come in and almost dark when I leave, but I know there's a lot going on, and it's exciting to see that and like them and share and, and talk to the kids about it. Man, you did that? I'm not saying we have to do that, but I think that is something that works really, really well in the district that I work in. But this is beautiful. I love seeing the faces that we are here today for, shining and being shared and representing. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, President Schultz, Vice President Anderson. So yeah, that is something we are trying to do more of. So we are working with our principals and sending out communication to them that we want more stories. So we are going to be sharing more stories. So hopefully you'll start to see more of that on social and in status.
I agree. Mrs. Anderson, you do already share things, but I agree the personal touch, the teacher aspect, the details, are what parents want to see and what helps be shared rather than the overall. Yes. Okay, one thing. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The pop-up banners that you mentioned, are those to use at events, or where will you use the pop-up banners?
Yeah, President Schultz, so they will be used for the school's marketing efforts. So when they're at job fairs or just anything enrollment-based too. So just wherever they are for any marketing needs. So even if they're just, if Power Ranch is having an event, they can have it up and welcoming parents in. So just all marketing needs.
Perfect. The video, the 1-minute video was very pretty and very nice. Is there, attention spans are very short, about 12 seconds. And so are there plans to create other videos that are about 15 seconds long? And I'm very proud of Higley's programs, well, Mandarin, but also Spanish and gifted and all of the different things that we offer as a district to be able to share that with the community as well in a short video.
President Schultz, yes. So Curtis is doing a lot of different videos right now. So he is working on just doing a video for every school as well as just shortened videos for advertisements.
Awesome. I can't wait to see him. Thank you. Oh, one thing before, I just have one last thing. I know I asked Christine, do you have any feedback yet? I know it's early. I saw a mailer that was created and it was really pretty and they have a QR code on it. And so I wanted to see if there was any data on that yet.
So I contacted President Schultz, I contacted Valpak today. So there is not any results yet because the mailers just finished this week,
okay. But
they will have us results or the analytics by next Thursday. So I'll include that in status.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mrs. Van Hook.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not trying to be negative really, but I do have one concern in Anchor 1, Strategic Anchor 1. The part about the portrait of a graduate, and again, this social emotional aspect is just being embedded in every aspect of our schools, of our lives, and I don't know if, I'd like to know where this, the whole portrait of a graduate came from. I know it's again part of this whole child, whole school, group think, teaching kids to think as a group and instead of how to think and teaching them what to think and not being able to think individually and out of the box. So I'm curious to know where this idea of portrait of the graduate was brought into Higley, and it's okay if you can't answer that, but I'm hoping that I can get the answer to that at some point.
Dr. Pulley, would you like to answer where the portrait of a graduate came? Oh, we were extensive in the board. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. sorry.
Absolutely.
I grappled with that a little bit just because it was in the slideshow, that if it was okay, but we'll move on and then
Thank you.
discuss that later.
And just how, it was initiated, but we can discuss that later. With this moving the district away from state standards, because it's moving the district away from state standards and towards more social competencies. Superintendent Tom Horn, Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Horn, is trying to rid our schools of social emotional learning.
We can't talk about that right now because we're talking about the marketing plan, and so it's not part of the.
But it is related because it's the portrait of a graduate is not to state standards.
But we're not
So
talking about the portrait of a graduate right now. We're talking about the marketing plan. If we want to talk about the.
So how do I address that? That's part of our strategic anchor 1.
So while the
But it's
strategic,
part of our
but while the
marketing, though.
strategic plan is here, we're talking about communications and community relations. We're not talking about anything that has to do with social emotional. Teresa's not working on social and emotional at all right now. She's working on a marketing plan to market our schools. And that's what's on the agenda right now to talk about.
Okay, so we're,
Yes, you can.
okay,
Right.
I will do that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Are there other questions for the marketing plan currently? I am very excited to see this, as you know that I love marketing, and so I'm excited. It's my background. Sorry, I don't just love it. Mrs. Wade, sorry. But I'm very excited to see this, and I love the videos, and I look for more, and to be able to get more kids involved and staff involved at the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 6.4, fiscal year 2023-2024 employee contracts. Mrs. Johnson?
Yes, President Schultz and board members. I present today some of the changes that have been made to the certified employees contract. That was the contract that we really wanted to outline all of the pay elements. In the past, it was put into one big paragraph, basically, and so we felt it was in the best interest for the employee to understand exactly what they would be paid for based on their base pay, of course, and then the classroom site funds base and the classroom site funds retention stipend, and as well as the pay for performance. And I think in the next section under the action plans, we'll be talking even more about the contracts, but we wanted to point out what had really changed. This was the biggest change probably in any of the contracts, is really separating out the pay elements as we do when we present an offer to an employee. I also need to say, as we get to the contracts, there were some dates, no language, but dates that had not been changed for the next fiscal year, and so we will need to make an adjustment to those as well.
Thank you, Ms.
Questions at this point?
I'm sorry?
Any questions at this point?
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you very much. Moving on to 6.5, amendment to policy GDL, support staff workload.
President Schultz and members of the board, I will speak to that change as I'm reviewing the policy for our employees under personnel. I noticed that this was a very interesting one, that the week started on Thursday and ended on Wednesday. We believe that happened in the past based on our checks being printed outside of the district, and that's how the work week had to look. We now print our paychecks within the district. And so that change is necessary because that really is our work week. We start at 12:01 a.m. on Monday and we end on Sunday.
Seems reasonable. Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to 6.6, Amendment to Policy JLCB, immunization of students.
I talk so loud you could probably hear me anyway, so I didn't even notice. The immunizations of students, so what you see in the blue is part of the new legislation and from the state and following those laws that come into the ARS codes. So we have the board follows Arizona law as it applies to immunizations of students. And then under that, we have the following immunizations are not required for school attendance. This is what's being added. And you have the human papillomavirus, that's known as HPV, and the COVID-19 or any variant of COVID-19. And under that, it says a school district or charter school is a government entity that requires a person under 18 years of age to receive a vaccination for COVID-19, which the state will not, but they're stating that so you know. Any variant of COVID-19 must obtain the consent of the person's parent or guardian. And to add just below that, the board authorizes the superintendent to create procedures for verifying immunizations records of students when we're enrolling them in school, which is we already have in place. So, do you have any questions?
I mentioned to Dr. Foley that I wanted to ask for an amendment to be added to the policy according to a statute, because I do notice that in the policy, I think just on that, there's just one area where it says unless student is exempted, but the policy, we have statute 15-873 that allows children to utilize exemptions, and I think that that should be mentioned through the procedures to say, you know, verifying immunizations or exemptions or exemption records of students. And anywhere where it says immunization records, it should also state or exemptions, because that is in state statute as well. And I'm sorry, but I didn't see it. Oh, it is listed at the bottom, but it would be nice to be able to see that verbiage throughout the document as well.
President Schultz, Board Member Van Hook, what we can do is, again, we bring the process that we have done, and that's why you see as an information item and you see as an action item, is that our committee reviews this. You'll notice at the top of this one, it has a copyright. That means that ASBA and their resources have looked at the policy, they've looked at the most updated laws, and they made the recommendation to us. We and our policy committee looked at that and chose to keep it as it was and bring it to you. Whenever we choose to make a variation, what we do is we would take the feedback you'd have. If the rest of the board wanted us to consider doing that, we would bring it back to the policy committee. We would look at it. If we then decided to add it or change it, we would have an attorney review it one more time just to make sure, again, that we weren't adding or customizing this in a way that would, not be legal. Being that you're referencing a law that's already listed on there, it would just mean that we would remove the copyright. So if that would be what the direction the board would want us to do, we would pull it from action tonight and bring it back in another meeting as another policy review, if that is something you'd all like us to consider.
Thank you.
So we do that during the... Okay. Any other questions or concerns? All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sticking around so long. Okay, moving on to action items. 7.1, the approval of the fiscal year 2023-2024 employee contracts. I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 employee contracts. Excuse me.
Second.
All those in, yep, you're perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 5-1. And 7.2, approve policy JDL support staff workload. I make a motion to approve policy JDL support staff workload. I apologize.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 7.2 passes. And then 7.3, I make a motion to approve policy JLCB, immunizations of students. Second. Questions, comments, concerns? At this time is when you would make a motion to, oh, sorry.
To hold.
So, Mrs. Schultz, if you would like to move forward, what you can do is make your motion to not waive the second reading and that the administration take a review at it, because the motion is, usually we have 2 readings unless they're pretty standard. This motion is to waive the second reading. So we can choose not to waive, or not to, we're not going to waive the second reading. We want it reviewed again and brought back to us. So
yeah, so I can make a motion to not waive the second reading. I make a motion to not waive the second reading and have the staff bring it back to us.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So what's happening is that we're not voting on this right now. We're asking that the staff looks at this again because we usually have second reviews of items, and this is a policy that was pretty straightforward. So we're...
Because we're unhappy that it's listed at the bottom and not verbally written into the thing.
Right.
Not necessarily unhappy. I just think that there's should be verbiage added that's part of law. That's in state statute.
More than the law listed, is that what I'm...
Yes. So it's just the word exemption in addition to it.
I'm going to say no too. So, and Christina, I couldn't hear you.
not to waive it?
Right. I mean, not to not waive it.
Okay, let me understand. So,
I'm saying,
Mrs.
Amanda.
Schultz, is your motion to waive the second read and move forward with it as it's presented?
Is yes.
Okay.
But that's, okay, hold on.
Don't mind us. We'll just have a little conversation here.
Okay.
So
I made a motion
to not waive the second read.
yes.
So, and to send it back.
And to send it back.
Yes.
And I seconded, and then there's...
And then there was a vote.
Right. And I'm voting nay. Yes.
Okay,
And so the
I think
vote-
the confusion was on the vote there.
And then Michelle voted yay. Yeah. Okay. and Christina?
Yay.
Okay, so 3-2. So
3 to
we'll
2,
bring that
so-
back. So we're not voting on it. Oops, I'm sorry.
So 3 to 2, we're asking
For you to bring.
the administration to
bring
review it. Simply having the conversation of the concern, take it back to ASBA. It is a copyrighted. Is there an issue? Is there a legal issue if it's statute? If there's a legal issue the way it's written, and if they choose to come back and say there's no legal issue the way it's written, and district is comfortable with that, they'll bring it back as is. If they're still, even though if they say there's no legal issue, we reach with our attorneys and they say it's fine as is, and that's what they want to bring back, that's what they can bring back and the board can vote. If our attorneys at that point say, you know what, it's perfectly fine to throw that exemption in there, we take the copyright off, we throw the word exemption wherever it is in there already in an area, that then they'll bring back an amended copy. So either way, the next time it comes back, that is our second read, and we will have to vote on approving or not approving the policy.
So you'll bring this back to us.
President Schultz, Board Member Reese, that is our process, and that's why we use that process, so that we can make sure that we hear, and then we approve, and we also get that second vetting. And we'll bring back our thoughts, questions, or concerns, should we have any in that process. But it allows us to hear your thoughts, and it allows us to make those changes if we do, and then we bring it back for you to vote again.
And I'm not necessarily concerned. I mean, the word exemption is in there already, and just for me, I'm not concerned if it is or is not, because the word exemption is in our policy here. We do say that. But because our process is we usually allow 2 reads, someone can give feedback, they can go back and look, and so that's why I'm comfortable to have them take a look at it again, because we were just waiving the second one. Seems pretty standard, but if someone has a question and would like it looked at, then I'm okay with that. So I'm okay with the policy the way it was written, me personally, but someone wants it looked at, we can look at it, because the second read is typically part of our normal process, so.
All right, thank you. And then 8.1, future agenda items. Anything? We have a full calendar ahead, and as we get towards the end of the year, it will continue to get busier. Anything that you want to see on a future agenda item?
I don't. So we do have just referring to Mrs. Van Hook, we do have a strategic plan update in March and April. Perhaps with knowing, maybe if you review those anchors and can get information to Dr. Foley on, you don't have to go into detail of your concern, but these are my areas I have questions or concerns in, so that way they can be more prepared. There's a lot of history behind this, so to understand where it all came from and how it all came about is probably more than just a board presentation, because that is years in the making.
President Schultz, Board Member Reese, we'd be happy to probably, being that we literally spent, probably combined together 50 hours last year presenting parts and pieces of this, and we did a massive study. What we can do is do a individual session if you'd like to learn more about the process, the history, and very similarly to kind of our conversation earlier this evening about assumptions on terms and things without understanding the process and how we went through it and who was involved and what it means to Higley and how we're operationalizing it. Sometimes we can get very caught up on buzzwords or terms and their intention or their meaning without understanding the context. So perhaps we could do that, because we will be bringing to you additional strategic plan work and updates as part of our goals. As you've been seeing, the conversations you've had tonight even were connected to that. So for upcoming agenda items, you do have more strategic plan updates, but we can also do a study session or individual sessions for individuals who want to learn more about the work and history that went into that, so that the whole board doesn't need to repeat it for those who have been involved in multiple hundreds of hours of collective time.
I think if you can, for the purpose of that presentation, small summary, because I think that's always good for us. But as far as details and specific, and like Dr. Foley said, sometimes it's hard because there's certain buzzwords. Portrait of a graduate means a lot of things. You look up a portrait of a graduate, it has a whole thing that it means, which is not necessarily just those are the words we're using. It doesn't mean the same thing for us. Same with restorative justice. We had that conversation. Restorative justice is a specific program, but it means something different when we were talking about it in context. So I think if you have the opportunity to meet to get all of that, I think would be really good. Also, so your certain areas could be addressed. It doesn't mean it can't be addressed in the update as well, but there's a lot of information there from the whole strategic plan. And I think if you just give a summary, what our old strategic plan was, when you guys started working on it, who was involved, and how this one evolved a little bit, I think would be fine for the presentation piece. But I would highly recommend to find some time because there's a lot of work in there.
I'm blinking. There we go. And I'd like to be able to do that and be able to learn for myself, but also for the public who would like to learn more about that whole aspect, that has done their homework and thinks it's something else. And
I would recommend then to go back and look at our board meetings, because this went over board meeting, over board meeting, over board meeting. I mean, this was all done publicly in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So I hear
So
it.
2 years of board meeting.
Well, it is. I mean, and so I understand maybe people weren't as involved or paying attention back then, but it's not that it was done behind closed doors. It was done very publicly. All of it, lots of presentations on each of the anchors and who was responsible and how they were going to do that.
And many
So-
community members from the preschool kids all the way up. So everybody was involved in this, and we've discussed it for 2 years. So if we are going to talk about it again, I'd like for it to be very short.
That's what I'm saying, a brief
minimal,
summary
yes.
on that piece. But if anyone wants more information, I mean, I would say go back and look at our board meetings for the last 2 years because it's there, so.
Okay. 9.1, board initiatives. Nobody? All right. 10, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Meeting adjourned.